So good evening. It is February 26th. This is the 7 o'clock meeting of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen. All members of the board are present this evening. If I could invite everyone to join us here this evening, and we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We do have transmission of Treasury warrants 3232A, 3333A, 34, and 34A. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion made
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Unanimous? Yes, Mr. McCoy? I think yes. Approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, one from November 6th, 2017, and one from November 13th, 2017. We'll take them up individually. November 6th.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes from November 6, 2017 meeting.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on the November 6th minutes? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. November 7th, I'm sorry, the November 13th minutes.
I'll make a motion that we accept the November 13 minutes with the exception of page 5. 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down, the spelling of the last name needs to be corrected. I just happened to notice it. Page 5.
Oh, I'm on page 6.
Yep.
C-A-I-R-A. Just a correction on the last name. Kyra, Michael. I don't know why I caught it, but
That's impressive.
pretty good, huh?
It's very good. If I went through, I bet you there's at least one Champaux that's done wrong somewhere in there.
I'll second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Made and seconded. Any additional discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Our 7 o'clock scheduled appointment is with Mr. Anthony Lodato, manager of GameStop Incorporated, with regards to a public hearing relative to application for secondhand dealer license for property located at 246 Main Street. Mr. Lodato? Good evening, sir. How are you? You have your receipts. Awesome. We love to have those. I guess that's really the motivation or the impetus for you being here this evening. If you don't mind, quickly just take a seat. I'm sure we can have this taken care of quickly. It is a public hearing. Jeff, if you don't mind, just remind us why Mr. Lodato is here again, please.
Yes, you'll recall that this was taken up in January, the request for a secondhand dealer's license. At the time, the abutters, there was not confirmation that the abutters had been notified. Because it is a public hearing, it's required that the applicant notify all of the abutters. So as a consequence, that's why we're here tonight.
Very well. And these green slips are the certified mail receipts that do indicate that, in fact, the abutters have been notified
Yes.
of this change. So thank you, Mr. Lodato, for your working with the town and on all of this. So remind us again, sir, what but I guess what it is that you're doing and what this license specifically permits you to do.
So essentially, just we buy back product or games, iDevices and stuff like that from people from around town and whatnot to resell under like a pre-owned label.
Specifically because you are buying used games and then turning around and reselling them, that's
Exactly.
different than just buying or selling new product.
Right.
And you need a special permit for that purpose.
Yes.
To that end, Mr. Hull, do we have recommendations?
Yes, they remain favorable with the police department. They have no issues or concerns. So we're...
Okay, very well. Any questions from the board? Yeah,
Just one more. Good evening, welcome back. I just want to, I think you mentioned it last time, but I think it's worth repeating for residents. If they bring a used game in, they can get a discount maybe on a new game, is that correct?
Yes. Yes,
So they
it
could
is.
save some money, so obviously want to urge people to do that. So best of luck and thanks for doing business here.
Thank you.
Anyone else from up here? It is a public hearing. Someone from the audience wish to offer an observation or a question? Looks like not, so we'll close the public hearing portion of it and Unless there's any other questions or comments, you're all set? So I would accept a motion to, well, I'd accept a motion.
I'll move to grant the request.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Sir, thank you again for cooperation, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
So just as a FYI, you'll receive this later in the week.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Our scheduled 7:10 appointment, we're just a moment or two ahead of schedule, is with Mr. Stephen Erickson. Is that you, sir? So I'm going to jump right in, if that's all right with you. From Fordham Associates Incorporated, doing business as the Aleppo Temple, 99 Fordham Road. And it is a request to change the manager from Ernie Pearlstein to Stephen G. Erickson. Mr. Erickson, if you care to, would you take the side table there, and we'll just engage in a little conversation here briefly. So, Mr. Erickson, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Certainly, we recognize and respect your organization greatly, and just wanted to open the floor to you to just sort of give us a summary of what's happening with regard to this change in your roles and responsibilities.
Well, Ernie Pearlstein's been, had the responsibility for, I believe, 4 years, and he's just moving on. I don't want to say he's getting old, but he wanted to stop doing the job. So I had an opportunity, with my current job, I got let go in November of last year, so I had an opportunity to come in and help him out and take the responsibility from him. I was the illustrious potentate, Grand Poobah, in 2008, and I've been involved in the charity and the building since 1990. So I'm pretty well versed in what goes on over there at Aleppo and what we do for Shriners Burns Hospital and things like that. So I plan to continue to do this for ever, as far as I'm concerned. And we'll see what happens. As a matter of fact, the first guy that had the job had it for 39 years. Somebody else had it for 6, Ernie had it for 4, and I plan to take it and for as long as I can make it to work.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. Jeff, do we have recommendations or additional commentary from?
We do have a recommendation from the police chief, Michael Bogonis. Upon review, the Wilmington Police Department recommends the approval of Fordham Associates, Inc., DBA Aleppo Temple, change of manager to Stephen G. Erickson.
Very well. Any questions from up here? Commentary?
I'll just say something real quick. I'd be happy to make a motion when the time comes. I think the Aleppo Temple is a great organization. You do a fantastic job down there, and you're a great corporate sponsor of the town.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we've had a great relationship with the town for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Ditto those comments. It's just a great organization. It's fantastic, and you participate in the town parade, and you're always visible for Wilmington, and we want to thank you for that. And
Thank you. I mean, I'm
Good-
a little
good
biased,
luck.
but thank you.
good luck in your new
Thank
position.
you. Thank you.
Like my colleague said, good luck in your new position, and I also appreciate all you do for our community and your organization. Obviously well respected and much appreciated, and not only what you guys do for the Shriners Hospital, but for what you do for Wilmington, so thank you.
Thanks, thank you.
Yeah, indeed. I guess I don't want to be repetitious, but I certainly find it a badge of pride when I tell people that I'm from Wilmington, when, if I'm out traveling around, and sometimes folks will say, oh, aren't the Shriners there? I'm like, absolutely, they're there. So it's, we wear that, even though I'm not a member of your organization, we certainly recognize the
I have applications in
presence.
the car.
You're good.
I know, it's
You're
like,
good.
always recruiting, I like that. So thank you, sir, and good luck to you.
You're welcome.
So that being said, I guess I would accept a motion to approve this for this request.
Mr. Chairman, I make that motion to approve the request before us.
I second that.
Made and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Mr. Erickson, thank you, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Good luck.
There are 2 documents to sign.
Right here.
Yes.
Two locations, okay. We are at the 7:20 scheduled appointment here on the agenda, but we're quite a bit ahead. I don't know if there's any objection to jumping right in, staying on schedule, or I see Ms. Bigwood is here, so are you ready to go, Ms. Bigwood? Should I just let her go from there?
She's comfortable.
Ms. Bigwood, you don't have to, do you want to, we can do this
Very quick,
from wherever you're comfortable.
very quick, that's fine.
Take your time, we're ahead of
The stairs
schedule.
are getting lower every year,
Yes.
and it's a problem, so. I'm Betty Bigwood, 300 Chestnut Street, and I've represented the Middlesex Canal Association for many years. And the reason I'm here tonight is to ask permission to put a sign on the kiosk in the town park. We use the town park as our official meeting place for walks every year, and the kiosk needs a sign. Dr. Neil Devens took over the sign after Libby Sabogian's son Marty built it and gave it to the town, but Neil Devens took it over and he's kept it tidy and in good repair, and he makes it the various maps for people to pick up and take a walk along the canal. And there's a big sign for April Field, a big sign for the dog park, and we thought it was time we had a sign for the association. So it's my understanding that we have to come before you to ask for permission to put up a sign. The sign is 10 inches high, 40 inches long. It's an elegant, simple sign drawing attention to the fact that the Middlesex Canal is on the National Register of Historic Places. So we would like permission to do so.
Well, very concisely delivered. Thank you, Ms. Bigwood, very much. So I certainly want to give the opportunity for my colleagues here to ask any questions or comments. Ed, please.
I really have no questions. I just want to thank you for everything you've done for the Middlesex Canal, and look forward to seeing this sign up at Town Park.
Good. Well, thank you very much. We have every third grade student in the town of Wilmington, we've had for a number of years now, go through our museum at Billerica, free of charge to the town. Every third grade student.
I remember it
And
well.
you're one of your child
It was
children
quite some
came,
time
yes.
ago. Would you believe he's going to be a senior next year?
Time flies.
Mr.
for
McCoy.
all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Bigwood, you do a great job. Anything for you, Mrs. Bigwood. It's always a pleasure to see the good doctor out in the audience. How are you, Dr. Bigwood? Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, no, thank you for the work that you do with this. Just a question on this, is the sign going on, the sign is going on this
That,
piece?
uh-huh,
Okay,
the base.
yeah. Looks great.
It just draws attention to it so people can come and pick up the maps and the route.
Yeah.
That's the section that Julia Fielding and Stanley Weber gave to the town of Wilmington. It's a long section that goes from there up to Patches Pond. And it's just very nice to be able to walk through a wooded area along a historic canal. It's very
Yeah, I
nice
saw
the
a
town
pro- I
has.
saw a program on, it was on Wilmington Cable TV about.
Oh, yes,
about
we
this. Yeah, it's
try.
great. It's a great program.
We keep trying and trying.
Yeah.
And some people are interested and some people aren't. But it's their loss for not being. It's really a wonderful story of Yankee ingenuity to hand dig with pickaxes and shovel a canal 27.3 miles long that connected the Merrimack River with the Charles River. And it operated for 50 years and played a major part in the development of Boston. In fact, Boston has actually doubled in size, and people don't realize the primary purpose of the canal was to bring wood down. And people don't realize that Boston is sort of a la Venice, that the large numbers of trees, if you will, logs, 70-foot logs would go down to Boston and filled in the area, and then was backfilled with dirt, and it doubled the size of Boston. It's a wonderful story.
Mrs. Bigwood, could you confirm a story that was told to me, I don't remember by whom, but I love the story, so I just tell it. That Wilmington in the 1700s was known as a hop growing community. Hops, the
Absolutely.
crop that are used in fermentation of beer. And so that the argument was made, or at least the story that was told to me, was that the hops from Wilmington would get on barges at the Middlesex Canal and make their way into the taverns and breweries into Boston during the time that the revolution was being concocted by Sam Adams and others. So do you think there's any truth to the possibility
canal-
that those gentlemen were inspired by Wilmington hops?
Absolutely true. The canal was built over a 10-year period between 1793 and 1803. And each town sort of had their specialty, if you will. Chelmsford shipped granite. For instance, the Bullfinch building of the Mass General, the facade is built of Chelmsford granite brought down boats in the Middlesex Canal. And Wilmington contributed hops. In fact, at the peak of the hop growing, they made $30,000 a year. Now, I don't know what that is in today's dollars, but that's a sizable profit. And in fact, when Jerry and I moved to Wilmington in '72, there were hops. Every once in a while, we'd find hops. So Jerry happens to like beer with hops. It's not my forte, but it's a bitter sort of taste, and I guess it's an acquired taste. But Wilmington's forte in the Middlesex Canal was hops.
There's no end to the reasons I love this town. I'm sorry, Greg, I cut you off.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Big. Thank you for being here and bringing this to our attention. I too support this, and I appreciate the association and Dr. Devens. I appreciate them for the donation.
Yes,
So thank you.
very good. Well, thank you.
Indeed. So I guess we should probably take a vote to formalize this. I would accept a motion.
I'll make that motion that we accept, we grant the permission for the sign.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you
Bigwood.
very much.
And again, jumping ahead, I think it's safe to do so. It is the 7:30 scheduled appointment on our agenda. It is a review of the annual town meeting warrant articles that were submitted by petition. Really, this is just a review of those. I guess, Jeff, I don't want to steal the lead here, so just maybe give us a general sense of, there's going to be multiple opportunities for folks to hear the articles as well as discuss and ask questions about the articles. Tonight is really just a summary of what those articles are.
That's right. So tonight is the preview, if you will. The Board of Selectmen will be asked to sign the warrant, the final version of the warrant at your March 12th meeting, and then it'll be posted and it will be on from there to town meeting. Also, prior to that is a public hearing, joint public hearing between the Finance Committee and the Planning Board, which takes place on Tuesday, the 20th of March. The first articles to be discussed or highlighted this evening are the petition articles. These are articles that have been brought forward by residents. Article 47 is brought forward by a gentleman by the name of Adams Silva, and he's seeking to have his test results from the 2016 civil service exam for firefighters allowed to remain viable. There is an age limit per civil service statute that I believe is 36 years old, or 35 years old, and after that, unless by state legislative act, someone is not allowed to move forward in terms of being eligible to serve as a firefighter. So this article seeks to grant that exception. So it requires a vote at town meeting, and then it would go to the legislature. Next article is Article 48. It's submitted by a Julianne Hooper, and she is seeking to amend the inhabitant bylaws, Chapter 5, Public Regulations, adding a new section with respect to a ban on disposable single-use plastic bags at retail and food and grocery establishments. I know this has been an issue that's come up in a number of communities. So that is that particular article. Article 49 is submitted by Michael Newhouse. This is a proposal to rezone from residential 20 to neighborhood business. Map 24, parcel 120, which is on 960 Main Street. This is right at the end of Wilmington, on the Wilmington-Woburn line off of Main Street. and it's, as I said, proposed for change to neighborhood business. Next article is Article 50, again from Mr. Newhouse, proposes a rezoning from R20 to general industrial, the same parcel, map 24, parcel 120. Article 51 is an article seeking to rezone from resident 60 to resident 20, map 22, parcels 13, 13A, and 14 through 20, and then 18 and 14. These are parcels on Hopkins Street. Article 52 is an article submitted to rezone from residential 60 to neighborhood, residential 60 to residential 20, map 22 parcels 13 and 13A. This is, I'm sorry, let me back up here. I skipped one. So the prior one was resident 60 to resident 20 property on Harold Ave, parcels 6106 and 8108. The next one was the parcels on Hopkins Street, again residential 60, rezoning it to residential 20. And then the current one is rezoning from residential 60 to neighborhood mixed use. This is the property on map R1, parcels 21A, which is 333 Andover Street, the Sharapa property. And then the final article on the petitioned articles is to rezone from residential 20 to residential 10, map 84, parcels 11, 15, 48, 49, 49B, 49C, 50, 51, and 54. These are parcels off of McDonald and Bernstein Road.
Jeff is R60, right? You said R20.
Yes, so from R60
To
to
R10.
R10.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Opportunity for you gentlemen to comment at this point, if you care to, or we move on to the next, which are the town meeting non-petition warrant articles. So there's a little more meat on the bone there for you, Jeff.
That's right. So these articles are articles that have been put forward by the Board of Selectmen. The first few are relatively standard. The first, Article 1, being noting the elections that are due to take place. One selectman for the term of 3 years, 2 members of the school committee for the term of 3 years, 1 moderator for the term of 3 years, 2 members of the housing authority for the terms of 5 years, and 1 member of the regional vocational technical school for a term of 3 years. Noting that the election takes place on April 28th, from polls open from 8 in the morning until 8 in the evening. Article 2 is an article to hear reports from committees and act on them. Article 3 is to raise and appropriate or borrow money for purposes of paying unpaid bills from previous years. I don't anticipate any for Article 3. Article 4 authorizes the treasurer to engage in banking services, obtain banking services. Again, this is an annual article. Article 5 is the operating budget, if you will. This addresses all the various operating budgets for all departments. And Article 6 begins some of the capital articles. The first is looking for purchase of 5 replacement police cruisers, then purchase of 1 heavy-duty dump truck, with Plow and Sanders for the Highway Division.
Jeff, I'm sorry, are you prepared to discuss dollar values yet at this point, or do you want to refrain until the public hearing?
I certainly can. So just starting from the top there, the police vehicles, the price that we're seeking is $270,000. The heavy-duty dump truck with plow and sander price is $162,000. The next one is a purchase of a heavy-duty dump truck, an upgraded chassis with enclosed chipper box for the tree division. The price is $86,500. And then a school handicapped accessible student transport van for a price of $55,000. Article 7 is to appropriate, raise and appropriate transfer funds for the purchase of computer workstations for the general government, and the price here is $55,000. Article 8 is the purchase of a universal power supply for the public safety building and the town hall. Price is $20,000. Article 9 is the purchase of new enterprise software. The price is $1,050,000. Next is...
Jeff, is that gonna be drilled down a little bit more for us? I mean, do we ask questions on these now, Chairman?
I have no objection to it. That certainly there'll be more
Yeah,
detail.
actually,
$1,050,000 is it?
Sure. In fact, the plan is, and I haven't talked to the chair about this, but I would propose at the next Selectmen's meeting, having a full discussion. Denise Casey, the assistant manager, has been heading up the group. There's a number of department heads, both on the town side and the school side, that have been looking at this issue, replacing essentially the software that allows us to issue tax bills, that allows us to do all of our accounting. So the plan would be to have a full presentation at that meeting on the 12th.
Is this also affecting the school side as well?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, school in town.
The presentation would be on all the articles or on this particular?
On this particular article, I thought, given the nature and the fact that it is a big-ticket item, it would be appropriate to have a full discussion with the board.
All right, then I'll reserve comment for that meeting. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to learning more about it myself. That's a staggering number.
The next article is Article 10, which is the proposed replacement of lighting from to LED fixtures at the Woburn Street School. The price is $185,000. Article 11 is a identical article to replace the lighting to LED at the Shawshene School, again for $185,000. Article 12 proposes the replacement and upgrade of light fixtures at the ball field out here behind the town hall. The price here is $75,000. Article 13 is a proposal to conduct a study to assess the need and potential location for a substation in North Wilmington. The cost is $45,000.
Comment on that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I thought the Cecil Group that was hired for $155,000 to do the facilities master plan had done a study on that, and at the several meetings that I went to, we're pretty confident in the fact that their study showed that we didn't need a substation at this time, that the response time was adequate enough for the entire town, and now I see we're spending an additional $45,000 on a study that was already done by a group that we spent $155,000 for. So I don't think that that's needed.
So the intent, one of the comments that came out of the Cecil study was that the data that they looked at, because of the way it was categorized, I mean, they were drawing from data that was in our IMC system, which is the police and fire system that collects the data. It was not segregated, if you will, in a way that would allow them to be able to determine as precisely whether or not a substation is needed. They concluded on what the information they saw was that a station is not needed, but one of the things, for example, that they would see is that a response time to an incident in North Wilmington might be 2.5 minutes, for example. But it was not clear whether that was because a police cruiser was in that location and was responding to the incident and that was what was being measured, or whether the data was picking up the response time from the central station out. So one of the things that we need to do prior to, if there is authorization to do a specific study on this issue, is to get the data in a form that's going to be allow someone to actually make a better assessment.
Mr. Chair, a follow-up question, if I may. Jeff, are we still contracted with Cecil Group? Are they still contacted out? Are we still working with those folks?
The work is in large measure complete. We're just going through the final report and making any final edits, but it's essentially complete.
Well, the reason I ask is if we're going to be going through the final edits, I think one of them ought to be re-exploring this data. I tend to agree with my colleague, Mr. Kyra, that if we already have somebody contracted to look at this, that if they need to go back, that they ought to. I also find it disappointing that they didn't take into account what might be happening a few feet away from them in the town of North Reading, where they've already publicly said that they're going to build upwards of a couple hundred units that our police and fire might have to respond to because of mutual aid. So I'm a little frustrated that they had missed that or ignored that. I don't know which one it was.
I don't think they did either. I think they were aware that North Reading was looking at a substation. I'm not sure that that's necessarily Wilmington's issue to be servicing North Reading's personnel. In terms of the data, like I said, the data that they were looking at data that we generated. So, at the time when the data was pulled, I certainly was not aware that the data was in a form that was not going to be as helpful for them to draw conclusions as it should be.
How did that,
Well, I would just argue that I think it is Wilmington's problem if our police and fire department are going to be responding to calls, and we would do the same for our other neighbors in Reading or Woburn, wherever it is. But I mean, it's tough to ignore that our resources are going to be utilized in another community, and the fact that this group that we paid $155,000 ignored or missed, again, I'll use that, but it's frustrating. So I guess the ultimate, my question, you might have already answered it, was if they could go back and re-explore this, since they're already under contract, which taxpayers approved, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, for this study. It's a little frustrating, then we have to go back to the taxpayers and ask for another study from another group.
yeah, that's what I was gonna follow up. I hope it's not this group, because they were less than impressive. I think they were showing up to meetings late, coming up with the same data, not having the correct data, having highlighted, it just goes on and on with this particular group, so I hope we do a better job in finding someone to evaluate for $45,000, because that group, I would take that data that they collected and put it in a circular file. But so who came up with the discrepancy? Who found out that there was a?
Well, it was the Cecil Group, when they looked at the information and they identified the fact that, again, this is data that we generated. This isn't data that Cecil generated. They're pulling information from 10 years' worth of data that the town of Wilmington has kept on responses. And when they looked at the response times, and it clearly was, I think, raised some questions for them as to why some of the response times were 2 or 3 minutes. And I think they concluded that part of the problem is that this data was not mixed in with all of the data were runs that were being made by police cruisers that might have been, for example, on Andover Street that were trying to get to a location in North Wilmington. Certainly that isn't data that is particularly helpful in terms of determining the true response time from the public safety building to a location in North Wilmington. So their recommendation, after all was said and done, was that based upon the data that you, the town of Wilmington, have presented us with, it does not demonstrate a need for a new substation, but the suggestion or the recommendation was that we go back and clean up the data, if you will, segregate it so that we are able to identify calls that were police versus, that were in North Wilmington on patrol versus responses coming out of the station, that we clean up that data and reevaluate it.
If they found that the data was not accurate, why wouldn't we have provided them the information they needed to do it? I guess that's the next logical question to that response. And we're not hiring them back for this. I hope not, are we?
I don't anticipate, I don't know who will put in proposal on it or whether it will be funded.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Go right ahead.
yeah, not to piggyback what Mr. Kyra said, but I do agree, and I remember vividly over a year ago that they said there was not a need for a substation. We talked about it for years. I'll be honest, been on the board a long time. We have talked about a substation for years, but it has not happened. And then, obviously, when the report came out a year ago from Cecil Group stating that it wasn't a priority and there was no need for it. And if I could just jump back on here, Mr. Chairman, you were talking about a minute ago, I didn't say anything, but if I could go back to an article just to tie this in, you said back at the annual town meeting, warrant articles by petition, is there any feedback from the board? And I just let that go. If I could just go back to this article, because it is about a development in North Wilmington, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I forget what the article was, it must be Article 53, Jacqueline Walsh. I'll be totally honest, right off the Balliver Street, the old Sharapa Farm, they're talking about changing the zone from R60 to neighborhood mix. That just happened. And that's a zone that's an article that's being presented to the upcoming town meeting. And I'll be honest, I wrote a letter about it. I got it wrong. It's not 76 acres, it's 62.5 acres, and I was being somewhat conservative. It is not 10 units per acre, it is 12 units, so it still comes out to 750 condo units. What I'm saying is, it seems like, and I have to say it seems like Cecil Group was saying one thing, then all of a sudden, we need to spend money for another study relative if we're gonna see another substation in North Wilmington. And I'm looking at a potential of new growth here in the town of Wilmington, where we're gonna be flooding the school system. And I'm hoping to think that we're not trying to accommodate the future development of this. And I'm not saying that's the case, but I look at it and I'm saying to myself, if we have just one bedroom out of the 750 and put 750 kids into the school system, it's a big issue. And I think that's a big concern. And I'm opposed to that article straight out. I'm not going to beat the drum on it, but I want to make some clarifications and some corrections. But for us to spend money to something that we may or may not know, according to Cecil, it just seems like I'm just hoping that it just seems for this potential of new growth. But we really need to take a look at this new growth and how we're going to accommodate it. I know we have a public hearing on, I believe, March 20th, and I'll let it go with there, Mr. Chairman, but obviously, this is on the table, and it's huge growth in North Wilmington. And that's something I hope to think we should be accommodating the people who live here already and not try to project what's going to be coming down the road. And if there's something that we could try to slow it down, I think that would be the best bet, but that's up for the town meeting. I just say that, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put in my, my thoughts on this. I'm all for another study, because I was not a fan of Cecil Group. I went to a couple of their meetings, And when I ran for selectman last year, one of my thoughts was we need a new substation in North Wilmington. We definitely do. Not only for the people that live in that area now, but like Mr. McCoy just said, Andover Street and then the end of McDonald Road, there's another 15 or so residents that could be built there if that gets passed, just in that area alone. Mr. Bendel mentioned North Reading. That's 450 over 55 apartments that is already under construction because the roads, they tore all the trees down and the road's being built. So that's happening. And earlier this year, we got a report from the manager, and I believe there was like 18 or 19 police or fire calls to the apartments after the 55 development. So there's definitely a need for not only the North Wilmington residents that are there now, but there's more retail going in on Ballardvale. There's more potential retail going on Ballardvale. There's more potential redevelopment on Ballardvale, because once an anchor store like Target gets there, all around it, development happens, because other retailers want to be in that area because of the foot traffic in the area. So there's so much potential on the beginning of Ballardvale Street, and I think there's a study being done about possibly putting sidewalks on Ballardvale Street, or at least that end of Ballardvale Street. And 750 apartments or condos, I would be opposed to that, but any redevelopment of that Sharapa Farms, any redevelopment of that is going to be substantial. So there's definitely a need for a fire station in North Wilmington. We've been talking about that since, I think Mike Kyra was a kid, and he was a town manager, and he retired like 5 years ago. So we've been talking about it since I've been in town, and there's a need. There's a definite need. And when I went to one of the master facility meetings, I asked about that in North Wilmington, and I was told there was no need based on the calls, and now I'm learning tonight that the wrong data was there, and I was told that night that actually the length of calls that needed was over near Shawsheen Elementary School in that part of town. So that's another issue. So there's definitely a need in North Wilmington Fire Station, and I would be for spending, because I'm not a fan of what Cecil Group said in their data and everything else, that there's another study needed for, more so for a location of where that fire station would be, in my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, can I just follow? I'm not opposed to a substation.
Oh, I understand that. Oh, I understand that.
What I'm opposed to is having to do another study.
I understand that
When we
too.
paid a professional, a so-called professional group, to do a study that they should have done, and if they found out that the data was incorrect or inaccurate, they should have stepped up and got the correct information and did it.
I
And they
agree.
still should be doing it for us.
I agree, Kevin.
Whether we, like them or not,
Yep.
they were under contract. We shouldn't be spending another $45,000 for what should have been done.
I agree with you, sir.
And Mr. Chair, one more thing if I can, and I think if we're still under agreement with those folks, the fact that they showed up late and missed some meetings, and the taxpayers paid them $155,000, that we at least should be able to go back and say, hey, we want you to look at this data before we see any final analysis. And I think they owe that to people.
Have we
let me just be
finished
clear.
payment on the
We-
contract?
No, we have not, but the data that we're talking about is data that we have to cull. This is not data that they can't physically go into the police data system and pull that information.
Well, then maybe we should provide them with the data that we're talking about.
We can look at doing that, but I don't know whether exactly how that would happen. I mean, I understand there was frustration with the Cecil Group, and I agree that there were a number of meetings where they attended late. Those were issues that I spoke with the principal about. Some folks may not have liked the results or not liked the principal that was involved, but in my estimation, the work that they were tasked with doing was complete, and I don't believe that I can hold them responsible for looking at data that is sourced from the town that we have in our systems. It's not their responsibility to go and cull out data that is perhaps not appropriately set up in our systems.
So how, moving forward, are you going to get that for this new study? If you can't get it for the old Cecil study, then how would you be getting it for the new study?
The new enterprise software.
I'm going to interrupt briefly because I do see our assistant town manager who might have been more directly connected to some of these aspects. So Dee, please chime in.
Sure, thank you. So just to give a little bit of perspective, I wasn't here when the facilities master plan process started, but I have been involved since you were gracious enough to hire me last December. And I think to offer perspective on what the difference in the scope would be is that, the Cecil group was kind of looking at all buildings. They looked at the IMC data. Steve Cecil and his staff are admittedly not experts in public safety response times. So therefore, they were looking at the data that was provided under a certain lens. What this proposal would be is to not only hire a company that has experience with the IMC data, which is what our data is, but also that has expertise in fire response times. For example, how long does it take from headquarters, 1 Adelaide, to get to North Wilmington? Not, did the call happen and the cruiser or the fire truck was already en route to somewhere and it took 10 minutes. It might not have taken that time had the truck left from headquarters. So I think it's the distinction of having someone who is an expert in fire service who knows what data they need to be looking at, which is true response times, all times of the day, from headquarters to points in North Wilmington. So we're looking for specific on location, but also there are 2 other components that we would be looking at that the Cecil Group was not given in their scope, but also is not something normal that you do in a facilities master plan, which would be to look at staffing levels and equipment resources. So not just do we need a station in North Wilmington, how many people should be at that station, and what is the appropriate equipment for us to move to that station? Is it an engine, an ambulance, and a truck? Is it, what are the different equipment? Again, you need someone who is a professional consultant in public safety, response times, staffing, to do this sort of an in-depth analysis. I hear your comments and I share your frustration, but I think this is looking at a more finite amount of data, someone who is familiar with the data and whose staff knows how to interpret and also analyze IMC data.
Through the chair, with all due respect, Ms. Casey, I think that if they're a professional group and a consultant, then they should have had that information, and they should be able to provide that information to us, not us going out and hiring someone else who should have done the job in the first place.
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, I think we all agree that we actually do need a substation sometime in the future in North Wilmington. We know that. By us knowing that, I hear what you're saying, the assistant manager. By us knowing that, do we really need to spend $45,000 to tell us what we already know? That we do know. We don't have enough talented people to figure out statistically if it's a fire engine, maybe an ambulance, maybe we add on to the highway department. I don't know. Is this the $45,000 we're gonna spend to actually tell us what we do need? That's what it sounds like to me. But we can't figure that out in-house by, maybe we do need a third party. I don't know, but we already know we need a substation. Why do we gotta spend $45,000 to tell us what we already know in a roundabout way?
I'm going to I'm not taking another side, but I'm just going to look at it from another angle,
Did I hear what you said?
if I may. Another viewpoint could be that, I think, Mr. Loud, you said it's clear we need it. There's development that's happening, there's development that's forecasted, whether that passes at this town meeting or future town meetings. We can all recognize that the Schropp Farm's not going to stay undeveloped land forever. So there's more development that will happen in that side of town. And so common sense kind of says to all of us, I think, geez, it seems like logical that there ought to be some presence closer to that area for emergency response. But that's a lot of money to spend on staffing, equipment, a building, and all the other things on a gut feel. So I know you're talking about, do we have the internal expertise between the fire chief and other fire experts and public safety experts? Yeah, well, there's expertise there. But again, do they have the expertise to make a scientific determination that it is in fact a necessity to have a station in that section of town? Or is it still kind of just a gut feel, common sense thing? I get it. I react a lot on common sense. I rely on it for my personal life, my business life, and frankly, for my public life here as well. But making decisions that have millions of dollars in impact over the course of our lives, I like to have data that supports my decision-making, rather than relying solely on my gut feel and instincts. And so, I mean, it's $45,000, and I don't want to, diminish the import of that amount of money. And hopefully, through aggressive negotiations, we can reduce that cost. But if that cost is borne and yields results that clearly, positively indicate that we must have a fire substation in North Wilmington, now we have the confidence to be able to go to the town meeting and say, here's the data, and put it up on an overhead behind us, and say, this is why you, Wilmington residents, ought to be in favor of this substation, because this data tells us, in fact, that it's necessary. Or the contrary might be the case, that the data may just simply reveal that for the 25 extra seconds that we're going to save, the dollars don't meet that out. So I'm giving hypotheticals here, but I guess I'm not arguing in favor of the $45,000 study. I'm just trying to understand, or at least I'm arguing that there is merit to the idea of this. Now, I would suggest to the town manager and others who feel that it's a necessary thing for the town to have going forward, to have that argument really well tailored and made for the open hearing and for the town meeting when it comes to that. So anyway, that's my position on it. I'm glad to continue the conversation. I don't mean to shut people down.
No, you can put up 4 walls and a roof for little money. It's staffing it. It's putting the engines in it. And that's where we need to find out where the figures are. It's not gonna take a $45,000 study to tell us that, we need a crew of 5 or 6 firefighters down there on 3 shifts, and what the cost's gonna be, and the overtime, and what the cost of an engine's gonna be down there. It's gonna come from, the town manager's expertise in the fire chief and the town accountant to come up with figures and to tell us what it's gonna be. Ultimately, we may not be able to afford to do that. And we don't need a study to tell us that we can't afford to do it.
I guess the
I
question
don't
is,
think.
yeah, can we gather the data that I alluded to with internal resources? And that's a question that's worthy of being asked.
Okay.
Can we move on, or?
Good.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Meeting is,
Article 14 is the request for funding for a pickleball courts behind the town hall. The total cost is $80,000, 40 of which would be through appropriation, and 40,000 from the recreation revolving account.
If I could, just a quick question. Where exactly, in relative to where the fields are now, if I'm facing the fields, where would that be? The playground, the basketball court to the right? Fields are straight ahead of me, where would the courts be?
So to the right, just behind and beyond the basketball courts. It's actually taped off out there now. The engineering folks have kind of established a potential location
Before the fence to the football field?
before the fence.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yep. Next is a request for what will be 137,000 proposed for reconstruction, repaving of the rear parking lot at the North Intermediate School. So you'll recall this past year, the turnaround drop-off area in the front was paved, repaved, and sidewalks and all were put in there. This is to complete that work.
can I just go back to 14 for a minute? Are those courts gonna be lit, Jeff, or are they?
They are not
No,
proposed,
okay.
no. Let's see, Article 16 is to raise and appropriate or transfer funds for continued phased expansion of the Wildwood Cemetery. You'll recall Mike Woods was before the Board of Selectmen talking about the columbariums. That's the next phase, so there's a request for $20,000 to continue that effort. Article 17 is to raise and appropriate funds to continue sidewalk work on Lawrence Street. This would run from Lawrence Street, from Hamlin Lane to Shady Lane, 1,750 linear feet of sidewalk at a cost of $110,000. That would be the appropriation from, requested from the town. Next is request for appropriation for professional engineering services and software licensing for roadway management pavement condition index. This is a tool that allows the DPW to assess the conditions of the roads in a more data-driven way, and the cost is $35,000.
How do they test the roads now? What is this exactly?
So it's a tool that assists DPW in terms of assessing which roads need to be repaved or reconstructed.
I heard it's a camera system or of some sort?
That's what I remember.
Is that what it is, a camera system on the truck itself?
And there's also software associated with it that provides information on the condition of the roads.
So they're driving over the roads, and they're having a camera, then the camera's gonna tell them whether the road is good or not. But can't they tell by driving over the roads? I don't mean to be difficult, but it seems like common sense would tell you if you're going over a road and you're hitting a bump, why do you need a camera to tell me you're hitting a bump?
I could be wrong here too. So
Yeah, I
now
don't
it's
know.
two guys that know nothing about paving that will have a debate as to whether or not this is a necessary investment. I might make the argument that this technology probably anticipates the conditions under which the road will eventually need repair and allows for Mike Woods and his crew to be able to plan ahead and decide, Jesus, is this a project we must take on now, or is this a project we can allay for the next construction season? I'd be anxious for the open hearing for Mr. Woods and Jamie or whoever the right person is to advocate for this equipment and educate us all as to its necessity.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Mr. Woods and Mr. McGaldy, if they're there that evening, certainly Mr. Woods can speak more specifically to it. It's my understanding it's a tool that will assist us in trying to avoid situations where a road is, when it gets to the point where it's visibly cracking, that's probably not the time we ought to be doing upgrades. We ought to be able to anticipate so that we're not allowing roads to get into that condition. But Article 19 is to look at installation of traffic signals, Middlesex Avenue and Federal Street. You'll know that there are existing lights there now. They're need to be replaced given their current condition, and the proposal is for $105,000 from appropriation, and then $105,000 to be taken from our Chapter 90 account, which comes from the state. Article 20 is to raise a sum of money for the installation of traffic signal detection system at the Burlington Ave, Chestnut Street, and Deming Way, Marion Street intersection. One of the issues that has been clearly a case for some time is the signal sequencing, and oftentimes, because again of the age of the signals, it doesn't necessarily trip based upon the level of traffic, it's just based upon time. So you could have one leg of that intersection where there's traffic backed up, and meanwhile it's green on a leg that where there's no traffic. So this would be intended to reduce the bottleneck there and gear the signalization more towards traffic flow.
With an estimated cost?
$21,000.
And if I may, do you have this, could you project if we were gonna be looking to use this anywhere else in town in the future, if this was successful? Are we already using a device like this somewhere else? At the
Yes, I believe,
Glen Road in Middlesex?
I think we do have that feature, and I would have to check with Mike in terms of which intersections, but I believe it does exist at some of the other intersections.
Almost.
Certainly would going forward in other new, intersections.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Greg, I think at Glen Road, when they redid that intersection, Glen Road, Middlesex, and is that Wildwood?
Yes.
I know the presentations that we were a party to talked about that service.
Well, I only ask because if it appears that it's gonna work, then we should, look into it for other areas of town, try to alleviate some traffic there.
I think this will be a tool that we'll look to use on a number of intersections as they come up for repair or replacement. So the amount there was $21,000. The next one, Article 21, is funding for design and construction of a grinder system assembly at the Pilcher Drive Sewer Pump Station. This is $150,000. Article 22 is a school department request for funding to replace desktop computers and laptops at the middle school, $161,001, so $161,100. Article 23 is to replace existing projectors and interactive whiteboards at the North Intermediate, West Intermediate, Woburn Street, and Shawshene schools. The price is $135,000.
Jeff, can I go back to the 86 laptops? Are those for student use, or are they for teachers' use?
It's my understanding they're students,
Student,
yeah.
They'd have to be, wouldn't
I don't know, that's why I asked.
it? 6 teachers there.
So Article 24 is to raise and appropriate funds for their school department's ongoing installation of voice over internet protocol phone system. They have requested and obtained in the last couple of years, I believe it's either right around $100,000 to $150,000. This is a system-wide upgrade to their phone system, and they're requesting $50,000 to continue that project in fiscal 19. Article 25 is to purchase a new data center for the high school, and this is $50,000. Now this, it's my understanding, is not, it happens to be located in the high school, but it's not something that was part of the original high school construction. It's part of their infrastructure that happens to be located at the high school. Article 26 is to look for funding to replace the water line that extends over Route 93 from Woburn Street to Park Street. The amount is $850,000. Article.
And is it, the appropriations coming out of free cash, is that what I hear?
Yes,
correct?
that is the plan for free cash. As is, I would just point out the Article 21 for Pilcher, that would be to come from free cash. Article 27 is the replacement of the water storage tank on Nassau Ave, $2,500,000. Article 28, this is an article that deals with how premiums are used when we borrow funding. So there have been some changes that came out of the Modernization Act, which was a state law passed a couple of years ago that deal with the use of premiums from borrowing. And as you know, we will be engaged in permanent financing for the Yentile Farm project, as well as a fire pumper that was authorized a couple of years ago. This passage of this particular provision would allow us to use the premium that is generated from those borrowings to pay down the debt. Currently, that is not the case, and we believe it's advisable to use whatever premiums are generated to pay down the debt. Article 29, this is an article that has appeared now for the last several years to continue to address our other post-employment liability benefits. As I've mentioned in the past, this is something that the auditors look at. This is something that our Standard & Poor's, when they review us, they look at. And so we have put money aside. Our policy states that we should put away at least as much money as is generated in the meals tax, which this year is something in the order of $370,000. But as was the case last year, I'm proposing $1 million be used to fund our OPEB liability.
Jeff, do you know how many years we've been doing that? I know you said several years.
Yeah, I believe it's 3. I'd have to go back and look, but I think it's at least
So
3.
This would be 4 million now, going in, or 3 million?
Well, I think the first year it was 500,000. The last year or two it was $1 million. I'll have the numbers for the public hearing, but clearly we have $2.5–3 million or would have in this account.
Yeah, and that's also with the hope that Standard & Poor's would give us a higher bond rating.
Or keep us at a AA+.
Double A, okay.
Right.
You think that that's because other communities aren't doing as much as we're doing, or if not at all. I mean, we're putting money into an account that we can't get to. And I'm suggesting that maybe if we don't go up on that bond rating, we look at not stopping the process of putting money in, but maybe lessening it in the future. Just a thought.
Okay.
Is this something we could expect it's gonna be the normal now going forward? Is this what you plan to do for this amount each year?
To the extent that we can. I mean, it all depends upon our available funds and, you know, our financial situation from year to year. But, you know, this is an issue that has been debated now for some years as to whether municipalities need to be paying attention to OPEB or whether we can simply kind of let it go. You know, I'm certainly not for putting money aside frivolously, but I do think it appears to me as time has gone on here that, you know, the rating agencies are looking more closely at whether towns are putting money aside for this liability. It's a liability that's generated as a result of our health insurance, and you know, I think it's something we have to be attentive to.
Yeah, I'm not here to debate the importance of it. I just, the amount, I just want to know if that's something we could expect all the time, or if Mr. Kyra suggested
Yeah.
maybe, you know, 800,000, 750,000.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't have to be $1 million every year, and I suspect there will be years, quite frankly, when we're not able to do that. You know, when the economy starts to tail off and our revenues decline and our state aid declines, and we're in a more hunkered down mode, so to speak, in terms of trying to preserve services, you know, we will likely reduce that number.
And I only ask because, you know, we're trying to find creative ways to save, and if, you know, you think about if you took $100,000 off, we could pay for 2 or 3, 4 of these articles without even having to go to the residents. So that's something to think about going forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this, and that's why I said if it doesn't affect our bond rating, and you know, it's not going up, even though we're showing the fact that we're putting in funding, and working in another community, I know that they're not even really paying attention to it, and whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But yeah, I just would agree with Mr. Bendel, it may be a little less as years go on if it's not needed to put in $1 million, but this is all in the PRIT fund, right? Is this?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so that's a good,
Yeah, and one of the reasons, quite frankly, that I've been recommending that we be as aggressive as we have with respect to setting money aside is when we had our last S&P rating about 3 years ago, and at that point, I think we had only had 1 year of putting money aside, but we indicated to them that our policy was that we would put aside an amount equal to or greater than our meals tax revenue. The part of the narrative in our letter that came back was that they questioned our ability to continue to put money aside for OPEB. And so I wanted to demonstrate that, yeah, that we're serious about this. And we'll see. I mean, if it doesn't pan out, and I would certainly expect that we would at least be able to retain the existing AA+ rating. And, you know, unfortunately, part of the challenge with getting a AAA rating is, aside from, you know, good money management, if you will, they also look at the demographics of a community. So, you know, a community like a Weston, for example, or an Andover, where their average income is higher, is going to have a greater chance at a AAA than we are. But I think we still ought to pursue it.
Jeff, when do you expect them to give us their next rating?
Well, we will be, like I say, going out for permanent borrowing later this year, around June. So I would expect June, July to get our next rating. We'll have to go through a rating before we can issue permanent debt.
So that would give us a good indication if we're headed in the right direction or if we need to
Right.
make a change.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Article 30 is proposing to raise and appropriate funds for our capital stabilization account. Again, this is also an account that we have been putting money into for, I believe it's 3, possibly 4 years, and we have about, I believe, $6 million in there now. I'm proposing that we put $4 million in there, $3 million coming from free cash. Again, the rationale here is when you look at our facilities study and our own capital improvement plan, we have significant, you know, if the town decides to go forward with replacing, you know, the town hall and senior center and upgrading expanding some of the schools and consolidating schools, the total cost of all of those projects, dealing with the public works building, which is short of space, and it was a 1960 vintage building. The cost of all of those is $143 million. Then when you add in the ongoing cost of vehicles and ambulances and so on, I again think that putting money aside in a dedicated account for capital is going to be helpful in the long run, so that we can have the ability to deal with some of these issues. Article 31 is to raise and appropriate funds for the employee retirement stabilization account. This is another liability which currently is at $78 million, our pension liability, and this fund would continues to grow and is available to us if, for example, in a given year, our assessment goes up to a significant degree, 10 or 15%, and we're in a budget year where we can't afford to necessarily take all of that out of the tax levy, we would be able to draw from this account. So again, it's putting money aside for that circumstance. Article 32 is a similar article, again addressing
Jeff, how much are you putting aside in that? 31?
$1 million for Article 31.
And how much do you have in that account now?
I believe it's in the $2.5 2.5 million range.
Is that also in print? Is that account?
Let me check with Pam McKenzie. I don't recall if that is or not.
And you feel a need just in case, because retirement, we have unfunded liability of 78,000. I know we're on a schedule,
Right.
and the schedule's probably set to run out probably around, what, 2035 or 2030? I can't go beyond 2040.
Right, 2035, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're always assessed for that. And I'm just wondering, it's something that we're always paying, do we need to set this money aside? Again, it's money that we're setting aside for, I don't know that we necessarily need to do it, but, you know,
Yeah, so
it's something that we need to look at, because that unfunded liability is gonna be there. Possibly, it's gonna keep getting pushed out beyond 2040, the way this system works, and I'm wondering, you know, as, maybe after a while, we reassess it and take a look again and see if it's really needed to add to it, as long as we're keeping up with our bills to Middlesex retirement. You know,
Right.
we have,
So the assessment, the annual assessment that we get is based in part on the rates of return that the investments that the retirement board, you know, currently making. I think at this point, most of it is done by the state. But, you know, in years where the economy starts to tail off, or where the investments aren't getting the return that they have been targeted at, then that would prompt an increase in the assessment, because they're trying to get, stay on track with these payments. But yeah, I think we can reassess that going forward. The next article, Article 32, is, again, in a similar vein to try to address our pension liability. We're proposing to put $500,000 towards an additional payment on our retirement liability. So we're trying to reduce that debt more rapidly. We did that last year, and this would be the second year for that.
so, okay, so again, now, Article 31 is tucking money aside, and Article 32 is paying additional to our liability. Is that what we're
Yes.
saying?
Yes,
Okay.
yep. Article 33 is a transfer article, which, as you know, comes up every year. There will be budgets that need funding because they're over, and we will be looking to make transfers from budgets, departments that have funding that is not anticipated to be required for the balance of the fiscal year. So that remains to be seen as to what those final numbers will be. Article 34 is to appropriate funds for the funding of the July 4th celebration. Last year, you'll recall, the recommendation was for $25,000. I'm recommending $50,000 this year. The police overtime this past year was right around $50,000. Obviously, given the location of where we have the event now and the sensitivity that neighbors have, we've, I think the last 2 years, done a very good job of making sure that the event is safe and enjoyable. It's difficult coming out of the gate in a fiscal year when, you know, a department has to spend $40,000 or $50,000 in overtime before you've even gotten into the first week of the month. So I'm proposing that we use $50,000 for overtime.
Just a question on that. When it first came back to the common,
Yeah.
and I don't know how true it is, I was told that the entire police force was available or on duty for that entire weekend, that they canceled vacations and they had, everybody was there. Is that a fact?
Yeah, I can't say specifically that everyone was there. I mean, clearly, not only do you have your regular shift working and patrolling and doing all the things that they normally do, but you've got another complement of people that are specifically designated for the town common and the Swain area. So obviously that folks get changed out during the course of that four-day period, or so it is. I would say certainly the vast majority of officers are there at some portion of the time, or either working as they normally would, or at the July 4th event.
Yeah. No, the reason why I bring it up, it was brought up to me that the entire force was there. I don't know, true or not, or and that there were some people called off of vacation and they had to be there, and it was mandatory. And maybe the first year, because we came back and there were issues with the neighbors and we wanted to make sure the snow fences were up appropriately. And second year, maybe they should have cut back. But are they still at the full force doing this? And do we need the full force to do it? I mean, it seems as if, I understand about public safety. We want to make sure that everything runs smoothly. And but it's overtime, and we want to be, prudent with our funds, and I just don't know, do we need, is the whole force part of this again, or just a certain few? And, I mean, we're upping it, we're doubling it, so I just was curious
Well,
what
yeah,
the
so
police
it-
chief is doing.
Yeah, I can't say specifically, just because I would have to look at, I guess, the payrolls, but to confirm whether every single officer was on duty at that time. But like I say, I think certainly the vast majority of them were between working their regular shifts and having to be there at some point during the multi-day event. Like I say, this past year, the police department overtime was right around 50,000, so we will cover a portion of it, 25,000, through this appropriation from last year. The 25,000 will cover the balance of it, through the regular overtime account, but that overtime account is going to be in the red, so that'll be one of the transfer items that we'll be looking for at town meeting. Do we need to have the level of presence? I guess I recognize how important this event is to the town, and you'll recall the challenge that we faced a few years ago when we were moving it to that location, and I don't want to be in a position where we have that fight again.
No, I understand, and I recall that challenge, that I think the town stepped up and took a major role in providing that event, and it showed that it had some financial gain to it. There was and we gave it up again, and we were talking to the committee of the 4th of July to make sure that, if there are funds available after they're all said and done, and they're in the positive, that they should help out on these particular items, so.
Your observation, if I may just chime in, I concur largely. It's a fairly sizable leap from, it's double in size, from where we were originally to what we are proposing now. And, I'd be anxious to, and I hope you or I, Kevin, will talk to, when it comes up at the joint hearing, I'd love to hear the opinion of the chief. Obviously, Jeff has his thoughts and his opinions that he's just offered to us, but the person in charge of public safety is the one that ultimately is the one that, for me, makes me determine to what level of security that event requires, and what are the costs associated with it. So I'll be anxious to hear his response to that as well.
Yeah, no, and again, I bring it up because we're a day less than we've been
Right.
before, maybe 2 days less than we've been before, and it's going up. And I look at the police and the fire budgeting overtime at the finance committee meetings, and It's just astronomical, the amount of overtime that this town is spending.
Article 35 is for the Memorial Day and Veterans Day services, $6,000. Article 36 is funding for the Veterans Foreign Wars Clubhouse and the American Legion Clubhouse, $1,500 between the two groups. Article 37 is really a placeholder. You'll recall we've been doing this for a few years now. This is for the rink. There is no money actually expended, but we do need to have a placeholder. It's $526,000. Again, because it's an enterprise fund, essentially we're setting the cap for which that would operate if we ever did purchase the rink. Again, this is not an appropriation. It's not coming out of the tax levy. If nothing happens and things remain the same as they have the last few years, then there's no cost to the town. Article 38 is an article to name the high school auditorium after Joanne M. Benton. Article 39 is an article that was requested by the school department. The school committee took a vote on this, as I understand it. I've talked to Paul Ruggiero about it. They currently have a 3-year contract for their transportation services, and that is capped by general law. This would authorize the ability for them to extend the 3-year contract to a 4th year or to a 5th year, so they would have essentially 2 option years. And as I understand it, the premise here is that, you know, if they're closing out on their 3rd year and they assess the situation with bus companies and they talk to their colleagues and the bus company, the transportation costs are going up, they may opt to stay, exercise, you know, an option for a 4th year or a 5th year, so it gives them some measure of flexibility. Article 40 is, again, this is a placeholder article with regard to the tax increment financing agreement. As you know, we're in the discussion stages with analog devices. We are not at this point in a place where we know definitively what the outcome of those discussions will be, but given the fact that the board will need to sign the warrant on March 12th, we felt it was advisable to at least have a placeholder article here so that if ultimately there is a tentative agreement, it can be acted upon at this town meeting.
If I may, who will be given more detail about this at the joint meeting? Will it be you?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of me and the representatives that have been working on this, Karen Rashis, Valerie Gingrich, Dee Casey. We've all been working on it. And I would expect that a representative from Analog, if given the opportunity, will comment.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next article is Article 41. This is an article that modifies the table, the use table. Let's see, currently denotes the need for a special permit. It only references the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are instances in which the Planning Board grants special permits, so essentially the proposal is to revise the table and denote those instances in which the Planning Board grants special permits. So it's just to some measure, it's really a housekeeping issue. We just want to make it clearer as to which instances special permits are granted by the zoning board of appeals versus planning board. Article 42, to see if the town will amend the zoning bylaws 6.6.10.18, principal activity, an activity carried on as part of a principal use. This stems from a change from a couple of years ago when the neighborhood mixed-use district was established in 2016. The use chart indicated pet care facilities are allowed in the new district by special permit. However, section 3.8.14 regarding pet care facilities was not revised to include that new district. This proposed change will correct that by adding neighborhood mixed-use section. So it's a correction to a previous change in the zoning bylaw.
I'm sorry, you confused me.
Me too.
So what you just read, the justification or rationale, I think applies to 43, which was the pet care facility.
Yes.
But you were
That's right.
talking about 42, which was principal activity, and the change to 6.6.10.18.
Yeah.
Are they related?
Let's see, so the zoning 6.6.10.18, this relates back to the planning use. Any principal activity carried on as part of a principal use. Let's see. Yeah, let me take a rain check on that one. I'll have to update you at the meeting on the 14th.
Maybe it relates to 41, where it
I
starts
believe
with
it does, but
general principal use provisions under 41, 3.1.
I believe it does relate to the planning board's issuance of special permits, but I'll need to clarify.
Yeah. 42 is.
42 is the item I just talked about in terms of the change to correct a provision from
43.
prior town meeting. The Article 44, you'll recall at the last town meeting, there was a change in use at 84 Main Street, and what ultimately came out of that because of the map that was being used. In fact, after the fact, it was determined that there was a sliver of property that actually remained as R10, and so the intent is to make the entire parcel subject to neighborhood business.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, what was that?
That is Article 44.
We have a sign one, it says something about
Signs and advertising devices.
Oh, I'm sorry. Getting confused here. All right, the signs and advertising, these are changes to the sign bylaw that are intended to make the sign bylaw clearer. There's been an effort with, including Valerie and Al, to modify the zoning bylaw to make, create some clarity with regard to the interpretation of the bylaw, and also to address signs that are digital signs, and so that is all addressed in this article.
There's 6 pages of content that's being addressed and talked about on Article 44, or, strong of
Right.
5+ pages. I trust that planning, Valerie and/or the chair of the planning board will have the ability to dig in pretty deep at the joint hearing?
Yes, this, as I say, this bylaw was put together by Valerie and Al. It's my understanding that council has been involved also in working on this, so it's, the long and the short of it is, it's intended to make the bylaw clearer to understand with respect to signage.
Now, will this address signs that should not be up anymore? Is this I mean, we have that sign, the end tile sign that still needs to come down, I believe. I don't know when
Right.
that's going to be addressed by you, but
Yeah.
is that going to be coming down? And this is part of it that would address that?
Yeah, I don't think this particular, I mean, that sign, regardless of whether this passes or not, will need to come down. That's, yeah, I don't think
So
that's
that
a
will-
function of that, yeah.
You'll be taking care of that?
Yes,
with it,
yeah.
The town needs a new bylaw for signs, and this is changing it, because my years on the Board of Appeals, it was every meeting we were having to change, we were all confused because of the bylaw of the signs. So this is well needed.
All right, so the next article is Article 44, or 45, cosmetic tattooing. This is something that apparently is, right now, it exists only in the district that's reserved for tattoos, which is out along the Route 93 corridor. There is this particular type of tattooing, as I understand it, that sometimes individuals that are in cancer treatment will have eyebrows and tattooed in, and so it's done by facilities that are cosmetic, or what do you call them, parlors that you might go for a pedicure or a manicure, and the intent here by modifying this particular provision is to allow for that activity to occur in those types of businesses, as opposed to being restricted to the highway district. Any questions on
Yeah,
that?
no, I'm just Mike, I'm saving my questions for the joint hearing.
Article 46, see if the town will amend the zoning bylaw by rezoning the entire parcel. This was the one I was speaking about earlier, 84 Main Street. This is the one that was rezoned in part last year. There's actually a sliver of property that did not get rezoned. It remains residential, and the intent is to rezone it to neighborhood business so that it runs along the property line.
Could you just remind us where exactly that is? 84 Main?
Yes, it's just before, if you're coming beyond Grove Ave, it's on the right, just almost at the intersection with Glen Road and Main Street.
Thanks.
Okay, so those, I think those are all the articles that are being put forward.
Well, there's a lot of work there, and I think evidence will suggest to me that there will be a long a lot of conversation and probably a long meeting at the joint hearing on March 20th. I'm looking forward to that as a opportunity to get a lot of answers to a number of these questions that remain unanswered. So thank you for going through that. Anybody else, any summary comments on this? Very well. That brings us to our scheduled 8 o'clock discussion. So that went longer than I think we had anticipated. The 8 o'clock discussion is just, I guess, a review of the proposal or review of the process for identifying town council services going forward. And so I will frankly give it to Jeff to summarize what we're looking at. I know you presented us with a draft of the request for proposal for town council services and gave us a summary of a timeline that you were suggesting or proposing. So I guess I would ask you to sort of make your presentation to us there, and then we can have a conversation amongst the rest of us.
So this is a follow-up from the prior meetings where we were confronted with the news that Deutsch Williams would be disbanding as of the end of March. You'll recall that in my prior memo, I had suggested that that we make arrangements to obtain counsel for an interim period, and I was using the period of 6 months as a timeline, in large part figuring that with everything else that's going on in my office and the other offices that need to deal with this, that it would buy us some time to go through a process of issuing a request for proposal. It was my recommendation that the department heads that typically are involved with and use town council go through a screening process and make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for the hiring of permanent counsel. I know in some discussions that I've had with Selectman Kyra, the expression was to, is it possible that we could do this for, have this new arrangement, this permanent arrangement, start as of July 1st, and so went back and that was put this RFP together and developed a timeline which I think would work if the board is so inclined to go this route, so that we would be able to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. The board would be able to do its own interviews, either interviewing the firms that we were recommending or interviewing other firms, and ideally make an appointment in June. That way, the permanent council, we would know what their cost is. It would be in sync with the budget cycle, running on a fiscal year basis. I would also, I do think that it, as much as, you know, it's going to be a fair amount of work between now and the end of June, one of the challenges I think that the board may face in trying to do this process over the summer is your schedule is more limited, and you would more likely or most likely need to have additional meetings to go through interviews and so on. So the plan in large measure is to issue an RFP, which is before you. I would suggest issuing it to known firms who practice municipal law, and there are certainly many firms out there that we know of that practice municipal law. We would could advertise it on the Mass Municipal Association's website so that other firms that may we may not be aware of or may not come to mind could request a copy of the proposal. The proposals would be under this schedule due on March 23rd, and then a committee that I'm suggesting be made up of Mike Bagonis, the police chief, Mike Woods, the public works director, George Hooper, public building superintendent, Denise Casey, assistant town manager and HR director, Karen Rashis, principal assessor, and Valerie Gingrich, planning and conservation director, go through and review the proposals, schedule interviews with a select number of those firms, and then make a recommendation of firms for the Board of Selectmen to interview.
Mr. Chairman, could I
Please.
make a comment if I could? Thank you. I gotta be honest, I was really kind of surprised by this memo given by the town manager. It's completely a 180 of the memo that he gave us on February 2nd, which led to our meeting on February 5th. Our last meeting was February 5th. This board took a vote to assign myself and Mr. Kyra to sit down and talk to Mr. Foskett's team, which will be Mr. Hillman. We're meeting this Friday, and to sit down with Mr. Durenzis. Also, you had us appointed to the analog, which we met tonight and went fabulously, and we're working something out really good. All right, being that said, it's just that when I look at this, we were given a task by this board as a subcommittee to sit down with Mr. Foskett, who I believe is gonna be Mr. Hillman. I don't have a problem with that. He's gonna be meeting us this Friday. We just met with Mr. Durensis last week, and by the way, Mr. Durensis did say here, I know it was an open meeting. He said, you know, Mr. McCoy, I know we both butted heads, but I would hope to think you'd be fair to me. I'd be very fair to him, and I'd be very fair to Mr. Hillman, even though he's representing Mr. Foskett. On that memo on February 2nd, and I thought the town manager did a good job. I thought that's what we embraced. I don't know why we're speeding up this process, but I'll mention that in a second. In that memo, it basically says that we sit down with Team Foskett, in the choice of words. We sit down with Team Durensis, even though Mr. Durensis won't even be the town council. It'd be his company, and he said he'd assign somebody to it. And I agree with Jeff. For the next 6 months, we give Foskett, whatever his team, whatever they're doing. Why are we gonna change course right now and assign another attorney to do someone else's work? Stay the course that we're doing, gentlemen. Take care of the 6 months with Mr. Foskett. Let Mr. Durensis and his team take care of what needs to be taken. And I understand you're talking about summer schedule. Well, you know, we serve on this board. If that means we have to meet a couple more times in the summer, so be it. Now, not for nothing, we were talking about March 31st through, I think, September 30th, or whatever the date for the 6 months. I mean, even if we had to extend that for another 30 days to October, and it could be Team Foskett that might ultimately be our brand new town council, could be Durensis, or could be even somebody else. It's just that we have a lot on our plate right now. We gotta get through the town meeting, and even after the town meeting, we still have to wait for the Attorney General to render decisions. We're still waiting on the special town meeting. That's number one. We're still gonna have to wait for the Attorney General to render opinion when it comes to the town meeting. You know, I just, you know, it just bothers me, and I see a word draft, and I'm really hoping that we look at it and say, you know, if I heard you right, Mr. Carr, you know, had mentioned something about maybe doing it in July. If we had to even start in June to start interviewing an RFP later, that's fine, but I don't know why we're moving so quick on this thing. Where, Jeff, I thought it was a great program, the letter you sent out, and I totally agree. Let us finish the job that you guys voted myself and Mr. Kyra to do. We haven't even finished it. We're meeting Mr. Hillman this Friday. And then I'm hoping to think we could report. It's really simple. And I agree, Mr. Loud hit the nail on the head that you said last time, Mr. Chairman, on that meeting. Mr. Loud saying, hey, it's very simple. 6 months to one side, 6 months, it gives us breathing time. And that's what, it's real, it's not rocket science, it's real easy. You know, and, you know, I've been on the board for a long time, and I just thought I'd mention that. And, you know, even if we hire a new council, not even Durensis' team, not even Foskett, it'd be someone else. If we hire someone in September or October, that'd be like, you like hiring me part-time, knowing in 6 months you're gonna give me a full-time job. Of course, the law firm's gonna get the job in 6 months. We're talking about budgets, we're talking about fiscal year. That doesn't matter. We're the Board of Selectmen. We're the Chief Fiscal Officer. We can put that off for 6 months and work that deal. I mean, I don't know, I can't look in the crystal ball who's gonna be. Could be anybody out there. You know, but let us finish the task that you gave us. And I know Mr. Kyra can speak for himself, and we're seeing Mr. Hillman this Friday. We haven't even had a chance to report. Then we get this memo. This is a complete 180 of the vote of what this board took. And the meeting was on the 5th. I just say that, you know, I'd love to talk more if we have to, but I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman, let me speak. And, you know.
Let me just be clear, the proposal here, and it is just a proposal, that the permanent council, that the RFP process be done in such a way that permanent council could be hired to begin as early as 7/1. That doesn't change the work that the board has tasked Selectman Kyra and Selectman McCoy with, which is to talk to two elements of the current firm about arranging a temporary engagement for the period from April 1 through whether it be June 30th or September 30th. That needs to happen anyway, so I don't think this infringes upon those activities. The only change would be, would they perform that work for 3 months, or would they perform that work for 6 months?
And that's what we discussed. And it would make sense that we move forward with finding a new town council. They're leaving March 31st. As soon as we found out that they were leaving, we should start the process right away. The RFP is already set, it's ready, it's been there in the past. It wasn't as if it had to be recreated to maybe some things added in there, but I think it's important that we get legal counsel on board right away. And if we can start July 1st with the new fiscal year, it makes more sense to me to do that. And we have the time to do it, we should be able to do it. My only thing is that I would like to see all of the submissions of those that are applying for the job. I certainly do respect the subcommittee and would respect their recommendation, but if we get 10 firms or 10 lawyers independently, and you choose 6 of them for us to interview, I want to see all 10 of them, because there may be someone in there that I would like to interview. I think it's the board's decision to appoint the town council and its services that they provide, and certainly would take the recommendation of the committee you set up, but I think, don't want to speak for everybody, but I certainly want to see all of the applications that come in. And I think we can, this timeline is perfect, I think we can get it done.
And just one more point, if I could, Mr. Chairman. By sitting down with Mr. Dorenzis, and I don't think you and I, Mr. Parrish, should really divulge what was said. I know it was an open meeting, but it was just us. We needed to find out in the task that this board gave us, who's with who's staying, who's going. And we heard from Mr. Dorenzis on who he was maintaining. Plain and simple. We still need to hear from Mr. Foskett, who they're maintaining. And I agree on that February 2nd memo. I just think we're speeding this up too fast right now to look for a town council right now, and we're still given a task to at least report back to the board on who's gonna go with who and who's doing what. And I think we need to talk about that. I don't see it being an issue, us maybe after the town meeting, we start sending RFPs then. I mean, we're still gonna maintain we need services after even town meeting. I mean, AG is gonna make opinions. We still need legal guidance, legal service to the town. I just don't understand. This is a complete 180 of what we're doing.
I don't see it.
I don't either.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to go first, Ed, but I promise I'm coming right to you.
Please.
So, yeah, I want to be cautious how I articulate myself here. I don't agree with you, Mr. McCoy, that it's a complete 180. I think it's faster than we maybe would have expected it to have been when we met on February 5th. Because on February 5th, we were still deer in the headlights. We were reacting to the news. Okay, so what are we going to do? The most important thing then, and I think even tonight, still is continuity of services. We must maintain continuity of services ideally with the attorneys that we've had a relationship with for years, and in many cases who are working on active cases. And some of those attorneys are on the Dorenzis side, and some smaller subset of those attorneys are on the Foskett side. So what I believed we left the meeting on the 5th with is the request of you gentlemen to meet with representatives from those two factions or whatever, those two, I guess, remaining subsets of town council, and determine who among them are available to us. Will they still continue to be available to us so that we can have that assurance that we have continuity of services, and at what cost? Presumably, hopefully at no additional cost to the town based in comparison to our existing contract with them. So that was the immediate need that I felt like we were having you guys work on. The more long-term goal, obviously, was to identify a permanent firm for town council services. And, Jeff, I think we talked about a 6-month window to do that. I guess in my head, I never said, okay, let's count starting as of February 5th. What's 6 months from then and draw a line in the sand? It was, let's use 6 months as a buffer to allow us the appropriate amount of time that seemed like a sufficient amount of time to go through this exercise of creating a request for proposal and doing everything that Jeff has identified. From February 5th until last week, more knowledge came to you. And Kevin, I respect your position and your opinion here that it ought to be something we expedite that process for the beginning of the fiscal year. If that's something that can be done, and I kind of look to you, Jeff, to tell me if that is in fact possible for all the parties here at Town Hall to be responsive to the inquiries coming in. If that can be done, I don't see why we shouldn't pursue it. I might also suggest that the sooner that we get permanent counsel identified and on contract, that minimizes, in my brain anyway, it minimizes the potential for any new legal case that may come across, that I can't even foresee, but any new event that would arise over the course of the next couple of months, if we were to have an acting town council take on that case, and then only to have that council be removed and have to get a new council in there, the sooner we get someone identified as our permanent counsel, the less chance there is of having to muscle through a transition on a brand-new issue. That's not the only reason to pursue this, it's just another thing. So, if it's possible to expedite this process to the schedule that you've identified here, Mr. Hall, March 23rd, proposals due by 3 p.m., et cetera, with July 1st, effective date of appointment, then I see no reason to not do that, except, Mr. McCoy, convince me that we should slow down, because I understand that your opinion is that we ought to throttle it back a little bit, take our time, be more purposeful about this, but why? And I guess I haven't been convinced yet, and I'm not taking it out. Forget it, Mike, I'm not with you. I just want to understand your position on it, because then I might be with you, but I don't understand your rationale.
Well, I think I stated my position, and I'll be more emphatic. This is a complete 180 of what we agreed just 3 weeks ago, plain and simple. I'll leave it at that. And do I think we can get town council on board by September 1st? Sure. So I think we need to rush it right this second. I don't see us rushing it right now. Why don't we just table this until the next meeting? You gave us a job last meeting to set, we haven't even sat down with both councils. And to be honest, Mr. Hillman canceled on the meeting that he confirmed to be. That's fine. He's supposed to be here this coming Friday. Being that said, why don't you table this until the next meeting? Let Mr. Kyra and I sit down with Mr. Hillman, and we can have a report back to the Board of Selectmen. Table this for one meeting. Let us do the job you told us to do. And if you don't do that, I just think that's you're just rushing to judgment. This is a complete 180. Our last meeting was February 5th that you asked me to, that was the chair for the analog. We just sat down with analog now, and it's been 3 weeks since we made that vote. And that's fine. And we're trying to make some progress. Let Mr. Kyra and I do the job you gave us to do. Table this until the next meeting. And let us see what we were supposed to do. And you're not doing it by going forward with this right now.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to speak. I don't think we're rushing anyways. I think we are allowing Mr. Kyra and Mr. McCoy to do what we asked them to do. Because what I see, and Jeff, you tell me if it's different, from what I'm understanding, we're gonna need town council, special town council, beyond July 1st. For the cases that are going on now, it's gonna take time for old council to get new council up to speed on current cases. Whether that's a 3-month period, we're gonna need them for March, April, May, June, July anyways. That's 4 months out of 6. So I think it's gonna take 2 months for both sides, as Mr. Shampoo said, the two fractions, to get a new potential council on board with what's going on in our community. So I think you guys are doing what we asked you to do. I know you've had one meeting, you mentioned, and you can have another meeting this week, so at the next meeting, I just want to make sure that as of March 31st, we have town council. And if it's a 2 fractions, that's one thing. But I read this, and I was actually kind of pleased that we were going to have a permanent town council, if that's the word you want to use, for July 1st. Because having a 2 fractions of a split law firm, I don't think is the best situation for the town of Wilmington.
That's what the town manager recommended. I'm only going by what the town manager recommended.
And I'm saying we stay that for now.
going by the vote of this
For now.
board. All
And
right.
I'm saying we stay that course.
Right.
This is a new course. New town council.
Mr. Bendel.
Thank you. And I appreciate the two gentlemen who took the time to meet. And I don't see why we can't continue to go down that road and have this meeting on Friday, but at the same time, put out this RFP. I mean, put out an RFP. We're not bound to anything. We're just putting it out there so people can bid on it in the future. And like Mr. Lau just said, by the time we have the next meeting, we still won't have the RFP back. The deadline won't have met. But we'll be able to hear a report from Mr. McCoy, Mr. Kyra, and we'll get all the information we need. I don't see why we can't do both.
They're not mutually exclusive. What we've asked for you to do, Mr. McCoy and Mr. Kyra, has really very little to do with this RFP. What I feel, and correct me if you think that you had different instructions, for me was always engage with representatives from the two sides of what was once Deutsch, Williams, Durensis, and whatever, and get from them an understanding of who represents what aspects of the law, and can we continue to have access to them for our town council services. That's what we need that for continuity of services. I'm repeating myself now. So continue with that. It's not a 180 to look at this and that at the same time. This came to us a little faster, a little sooner than perhaps I was expecting it, but to me, I view that as, well, okay, good. If we're able to do this without putting undue strain or stress on operations of the town during town meeting time and stuff, then I think it's prudent for us to try to get as much bang for the buck, as it were, or as much done as we can. If it is a strain on operations and your staff with town meeting coming, then, tell us that, frankly, and we can adjust this. And maybe if it means we miss identifying and hiring town council before July 1st, if we put that out to August 1st, all right, so we had a month, so we sign an 11-month contract instead of a year contract, and sort of retroactive it or something like that. I'm flexible. I don't have to live to these dates, but we don't necessarily have to draw a 6-month line in the sand and say, okay, and I don't know, what's 6 months after February? Have someone do that for me. Thank you very much. So on August 5th, we're going to start interviewing council. I don't think we need to have that firm of a timeline in place here. If we're able to amp up the timeline a little bit, I think it's prudent for us to do so. And I don't believe that they're mutually exclusive. I'm sorry, I said the same thing twice. Greg, do you have more?
If I just want to note that we meet the 12th, and we could hear back a report from Mr. Kyra, Mr. McCoy, and then the proposals are due on the 23rd. We meet on the 26th, so I think we can accomplish both. I appreciate the two gentlemen continuing what we voted them to do last meeting, and at the same time, we put this out, and then we can gather all the information.
Let me just say this, I'm just one vote, I stick by what I'm saying, I was really shocked and surprised. With all due respect, I mean, at least the town manager could have consulted with myself and Mr. Kyra. I know we're not the chair relative on the progress that you were with us, number one, and was this a smart thing to do right at this time? But I'll say this, we've got at least 3 major lawsuits, New England Transrail, Olin Chemical, and another thing we're discussing, where I won't say an executive session, okay? There was a big question about Dan Deutsch, and he would be representing all those 3. And according to Durensis, Dan Deutsch is staying on with his firm. Mr. Durensis did say he would assign Lou Ross, who I know there's folks here, and I understand. But what are we gonna do in the next 6 months? When we decided we may hire someone else other than Foskett and Durensis. I get it, okay? And I don't know, I mean, I'm just one humble little selectman here, and we gotta talk. We've always had the luxury of having a fixed rate. Now, I assume if we're gonna farm this out, Olin Chemical, New England Transworld, or somebody else, believe me, gentlemen, we're gonna spend a lot more money than we are spending for town council at a fixed rate doing everything. But once again, I'm not saying we're gonna be with Durensis, it could be Foskett and his team. That's all I'm saying, I've said it 3 times,
And both
but I'll let it
sides,
stay.
both of those individuals have personal knowledge of the relationship that Wilmington has had with their firm. They know what the financial agreements were and have been, so they're in an advantageous position if they choose to bid on the permanent contract with the town. I would suggest, I would presume that they're going to. I certainly would presume that Mr. Durensis is going to, and his firm, and by virtue of the fact of who on staff is staying with his firm, I don't want to tilt my hand here, but that puts them in a favorable position, and I'm sure Paul's a smart enough guy to know that he is in a favorable position. He just, as long as he doesn't get greedy, you know, depending on how the other proposals come in, that institutional knowledge that they possess is valuable to me, both over the course of the next several months, continuity of services, as well as potentially, that, you know, when we start to scrutinize and look at other bidders for this contract, you know, I personally, and frankly, I won't be here. But I hope that you gentlemen and whoever is sitting in my seat at that time will weigh heavily the fact that those individuals have that institutional knowledge and hopefully can maintain not only the level of service, but also the level of service for a consistent price. And that's what I would want to be looking for. So,
Let me
again,
just add this,
please.
since we're talking little bit about the meeting, it was an open meeting, that Mr. Durensis said that he would protect Wilmington regardless of what would happen in the future, regardless of whether there was another firm, if we needed an attorney, that he would come and protect Wilmington, even if he had to do it for nothing, he said. He would pay for it. What else did he say? I don't have my notes with me, but he was very willing to continue on, even if we decided to go in a different avenue. So having Mr. Deutsch handle Olin and having that institutional knowledge, it seems as if Mr. Durensis was very willing to give him to us regardless of what direction we go on to. And those were the notes I took, so I think we're in pretty good
All right, I took-
shape if we
all right,
need
If I
that.
could say, I understand, so I took notes as well, and I don't have them with me, but I'll tell you this. You're saying to me, by Durensis stating that, I know specifically what Durensis said. We got a recording secretary, and I hope to think we're gonna see those minutes in proper form, and we're gonna see it. What I'm telling you is, Mr. Durensis stated that, I guess, Ms. Chu, who was going with Foskett, he said, I would happy to pay out of my pocket to continue
He
Ms.
also
Chu
said that
working
too,
that.
I agree
Right,
with you.
and he would pay out of his pocket to continue, because he said he had a labor lawyer. All I'm telling you is
Said that
that.
as well.
No, he said that. So you're expecting Dan Deutsch to do pro bono, man?
No,
New England
I'm not.
Transworld?
No.
That's what it's
That's
making,
not what I
sounds
said.
like to me.
That's not what I said, that's what he said,
No.
but that's okay.
But he didn't say that.
But that's
He
what,
didn't say
that's what
that.
he said.
He said he would pay out,
Anyways,
you know, that's
I
why.
guess we have a difference of
I
opinion.
just, I don't even know what we're arguing about.
I don't either.
This is the second time we've had this conversation where we all agree and we're saying the same thing, but we're arguing about
No,
it.
we're arguing about this
Ed,
180 move, plain and simple. And that's what
It's
it
not a
is.
180 move,
Yes, it
Mike.
is.
No, it's not.
I just, I want to agree with Kevin. I would like to see all the proposals, like Kevin had mentioned earlier, that any new proposals come in, I'd like to see all of them, like Kevin asked for.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff.
I would just add one point, and this is something that we will, should be borne out when the proposals are submitted. The target, based upon this schedule, is that the board would make an appointment at your first meeting in June. That does not leave a lot of time for the transition process. You know, files are gonna need to go, whether it's electronic or otherwise, to a new firm, if in fact there is a new firm. The only caveat I would suggest is that if that cannot be completed between the time the board makes its decision and the end of the fiscal year, there may be a bit of overlap between existing council and the new council, again, trying to get things squared away. But otherwise, you know, we do what we have to do. If it, you know, adds a few more hours to our day, it adds a few more hours to our day.
Yeah, I'd also like to see, I mean, this is like what Mr. Shampoo said, this isn't concrete, this schedule. I mean, let's see what we get back on the 23rd and go from there. I mean, if we have to wiggle on the dates, I mean, we have to do what's best for the community. Let's not stick to, just because we voted, you know, tonight, February 26th, we think this calendar looks great. If something changes, let's be flexible so we can make the best decision for everybody.
I have lots of flexibility built in. I know that there's some desire here to try to, I don't want to say shoehorn it, but to try to look at fiscal year as a target date for start. And I think it's a good date to target. But if I don't want to use that date or have that date be a limiting factor. If we don't have the right people in play or the right proposals in play by that date, I don't want to be hamstrung because of a date. So if we have to be, you know, flexible on the date, I would hope that you guys would be. I say you guys because I won't be. So I'm sorry. Are we looking for a vote here tonight to proceed with this, or is?
Well, so I'm looking for some direction from the board as to whether the board is interested in me issuing this request for proposal, or if you have modifications to it, whether you have particular firms that you would like to have the proposal sent to. Otherwise, we have, like I said, a list of firms that that practice municipal law in the Commonwealth, and that I would propose to send copies of this to them.
When do you intend to send this out?
It could be as early as the end of the week.
Could you send it out Friday after they meet with the gentleman?
Sure.
Well, we could send it out, you could send it out tomorrow if it's ready to go, if we.
Well, that's the question. Is it ready to go? I mean, I didn't read it every single letter. I didn't. Because frankly, I got it yesterday after being away for the weekend. I read the meaty stuff and I highlighted a number of, for me, what were poignant bullets, but I don't want to be presumptuous that you've all done the same thing. I didn't find any specific edits except under scope of services, Jeff. If the town seeks expertise in the following matters, and you'd bulletized, I don't know, 30 areas. One that I didn't see was, and the only reason it popped in my head is because I remember I worked pretty closely with Mr. Foskett when we were negotiating with you, frankly, on contract review. So contract review and language, just how do you write a contract? I had, again, I was using my gut and my intuition and some common sense and trying to craft some language for your contract, but frankly, I needed John pretty aggressively at that time to help in that regard. Yes, Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, I just want to ask the town manager, in your memo, February 2nd, 2018, on page 2, is it still the intent of you inking a deal with Team Foskett, inking a deal with Team Durensis to get us through 6 months? I mean, that's what we discussed. Is that going to happen?
That would be my expectation, yes, that we continue to have coverage with Deutsch Williams, with the Durensis element and the Foskett element for labor from April 1st through whatever time frame we have before new council steps in. Yeah, there's no question that we need to have them continue for an interim period here, whether it's 3 months or 4 or 6.
All right, so instead of the 6
Leave
months
that
that you were,
open-ended, right?
so instead of the 6 months that you were stating just a little more than 3 weeks ago, now you're saying we might just ink a deal for 3 months now.
Well, can I add?
No, I
Mr.
just need to
Chairman?
get an answer.
Well, I
You
think this
need
is
to
part
have
of
a
the answer, Mike.
You need to have a transition period, Mike.
Well, I
So if
understand
the
that.
transition period takes you into September, I mean, logic tells you that a new firm coming in, needs to learn of what the cases are, what the program is. Hopefully, they'll have an understanding of a government, because that's who we're going to be hiring. But they have to have a knowledge of what's out there. So that's called a transition period, when they'll meet with the other law firm and get the information that they need in order to move forward. That's in any business.
But the point is, are we gonna deal with 3 months or 6 months? What happens if we just do the deal? We're all hot, everyone's hot to try to get these people on July 1st. What do? We just sign a deal with 3 months with Foskett's team and Durensis' team? Meanwhile, it's gonna take us a little more 3 months for this so-called transition team? I mean, are they gonna just stay on and tell, all right, you're only good until we let you go? That's
I
what
mean, I
we're
think we
saying.
can certainly talk about the prospect
We need to
of
talk about it.
going on a month-to-month basis if there's some concern about, locking into a time specific. One of the things that's included in this request for proposal, the firms that are interested will be asked to lay out for us and describe how they envision the transition process going. If, as the newcomer, so to speak, what steps are they going to take to make that transition as smooth as possible? So we'll get some of that information, and how long do they anticipate that taking?
Okay, very good. I'm good.
So, the language of the RFP, I'm largely okay with it, and in order to stay on task with the schedule that was put forth, we would need to take action on this thing tonight. If you guys felt the need to review this for another 2 weeks or whatever it is until our next meeting, that immediately changes the schedule. So I put that in your hands. It's up to you guys how you want to proceed.
And just, Mr. Chairman, to your point, I would just categorize that point that you raised about general contracts
Is
under
it
other
there?
legal services as needed. I don't know that I
Okay.
specifically referenced that point, but certainly that would be other legal services as needed.
The other bucket. That's fine. That's sufficient. I mean, I think it's probably presumed.
I mean, there is a section here that refers to bidding, public construction, municipal procurement issues, and contract reviews. So
Oh,
it
okay.
could be in there
I
as well.
didn't see it. That's
Mr.
fine.
Chairman, I make a motion that we table this at least until our next meeting, that Mr. Kyra and myself do the job that this board voted us to do with Mr. Hillman. If Mr. Hillman didn't cancel out on that meeting, you could have probably done this tonight. Give us the job that you voted us to do, and then entertain it at the next meeting. I think that's the fairest thing. I make that as a motion. Let us do the job you told us what to do.
Well, your motion says to give you the
The motion is to table this until the next meeting, so at least we can meet with Mr. Hillman this Friday and give a report back to the board. And you'll have it well in advance before you set your agenda, and you can put that on them, Mr. Chairman.
So I accept that as a made motion. I don't hear a second.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to tell the town manager to send out this RFP as proposed.
I will accept that as a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Is there
Discussion.
additional discussion?
Yes.
We've had some.
I'm almost afraid to ask, but would this include our two colleagues still having the meeting on Friday?
Oh, absolutely, I plan on
Okay.
going. Know that.
Then I would.
You told me, you
I'm
gave
in
us a
favor.
job to do. I
They
fulfilled
still
my
have a job to
campaign
do. They
promise.
Still have a job
still
to
have to,
This RFP doesn't affect that job.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was,
Well, this was never discussed before, but like I said, it's fine. It's
We were gonna
180.
get here eventually. We just got here now.
Yeah.
You were gonna get here, it might have been at our next
I'm
meeting or
good.
the meeting
I'm
after
good.
that.
I'm good.
So we just got here now. Good for everybody, I think, except Jeff. So we have a motion made and a second. Is there additional discussion? All in favor? 4, against, 1. Bev, you got those, yes? Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
I wish you would.
Jeff, do we have any indication who will be representing us at the meeting, the joint meeting on the 20th, and then at town meeting?
The meeting on the 20th, I have not confirmed with John Foskett. I would expect that he would be here because typically he is the point person, but I will have to confirm that.
And town meeting,
Town meeting, at this point, it's up in the air.
to be determined who we come into a short-term contract with.
Right.
Will be covered.
Yes.
Thank you.
will that be discussed Friday?
Well, so
Are you meeting?
the meeting on Friday will be.
It's an open meeting, once you come. You can tell us then, how's that?
The meeting on Friday is with Rob Hillman. They're looking to focus their work on labor cases, so I would not anticipate anyone from Rob Hillman's group or John Foskett's group. I would anticipate that it would be from the Durensis group.
Can I make a request, maybe? Jeff, you just, I'm sorry, Greg, you put this into my head, because your answers were Foskett for the joint hearing, and then to be determined for town meeting. And to me, it just, it feels like the same individual, I'm not even talking about firm, but the same attorney ought to be the one that comes to the joint hearing to listen to all these articles and to the deliberations and potentially be there to, I guess, usher advice to town employees during that meeting. But then by virtue of having been at that meeting, that individual would have, I don't know, I hate to overuse the stupid term, but institutional knowledge. And so it makes sense to have that same individual be the person that goes to town meeting, where those articles are again heard and listened to and deliberated over. So, at a previous meeting, Lou Ross's name came up. That's an individual that I've been, as long as I've been working on this board, Lou has represented us on many occasions. And I've grown to have great respect for his abilities and his ability to communicate. So I don't know how you folks feel. I know you talked about John, and I certainly admire John, but if it's unsure as to whether or not John can be available for both, I'd be inclined to try to lean on one attorney to be available for both of those meetings. I don't want to belabor the point, but I don't think it requires a vote, but
No,
that's
I
just
think
my
that's
opinion
certainly
here.
reasonable, and I can have that conversation, and we can identify whether it's Lou, I mean, he would probably be the most likely, but have one counsel at both meetings.
Yeah, I would think it would be John Foskett. Right now, he's the town council. I would think that we would reach out to John first.
Right.
To make sure that he's
Yeah.
on board for both.
For both, ideally.
Both, yeah.
That's what I was getting at.
Whether-
I
yeah.
don't think really,
That's-
if it's not John, then it
I
should
don't
be
think-
someone.
Yeah, I
Been
agree.
very charged to do.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree on that one.
Good. Okay, sorry. So thank you, Greg, for putting that out there. You think we have successfully achieved the moment in time when you can go through communications for us?
The first is a memo to the board just announcing the appointment of the fire chief after completion of Civil Service Assessment Center and interviews with the top 3 candidates for the position of fire chief. I am pleased to announce my appointment of Joseph T. McMahon to the position of fire chief. Mr. McMahon was hired by the town in 1982 as a firefighter and has served in many important roles since that time. In 1987, he was appointed as a lieutenant, serving in the fire prevention. His responsibilities included both working with local businesses and involvement with the school department to educate students about fire safety. 1996, Mr. McMahon was appointed to serve as shift lieutenant, directing fire personnel to medical and fire emergencies, in addition to conducting training and directing the inspections and testing of vehicles and equipment. Mr. McMahon obtained an associate's degree in fire science from North Shore Community College, maintains his emergency medical technician certification, and has completed a number of classes in topics including incident command system, emergency driver training, hazardous materials first responder, and fire arson detection. He is intimately familiar with the operations of the Wilmington Fire Department, and I am fully confident that he will provide strong leadership in the department and serve as a resource to fellow department heads and the community at large. And his appointment took effect on February 19th.
This is great. I think, I don't want to speak for the board. If you guys want to chime in, you're certainly welcome to, but I just wanted to personally, and I don't know if he's listening, but Mr. McMahon, we're really just delighted to have you as the chief and wish you the highest of congratulations and good luck, and look forward to getting to know you.
Next is a memo to the board announcing the appointment for the deputy fire chief. I am pleased to announce the appointment of William F. Kavanaugh III as deputy fire chief for the Wilmington Fire Department. Mr. Kavanaugh participated in an assessment center in accordance with the requirements of civil service, which was conducted on December 6, 2017. Mr. Kavanaugh has served as a firefighter since 2007, was promoted to fire lieutenant in 2014, serving as the town's fire prevention officer. In his capacity as a certified fire prevention lieutenant, he performs plan reviews, occupancy inspections, and final inspections on fire alarm systems. In his current capacity, he has developed an intimate knowledge of the Massachusetts Fire Code. He has been responsible for conducting quarterly inspections on nursing homes, annual inspections on schools, gas stations, group homes, and medical facilities. Mr. Kavanaugh has also maintained a close working relationship with the health director with respect to inspections on restaurants, food service establishments, and manufacturing facilities. In 2016, Mr. Kavanaugh obtained and administered a grant through the National Fire Prevention Association to assist elders. Working on this grant, known as Remembering When, in conjunction with Elderly Services Director Terry Marciello, he completed a training regimen on instructing elders on fire and fall prevention. Mr. Kavanaugh and Ms. Marciello provided instruction to 32 seniors over a 6-month period on ways to be safe in their homes. These hands-on workshops were very well received with the elders who participated. Prior to his employment with the town, Mr. Kavanaugh served for over 4 years in the United States Navy before receiving an honorable discharge. I've been impressed with Mr. Kavanaugh's dedication to Wilmington and the fire service, and believe he will be a great complement to the resources and a resource to the fire chief, Joe McMahon. His service on the town in the capacity of Deputy Fire Chief will be effective as of April 27, 2018.
Similar comments. In my view, good things should happen to good people, and that's evidence of something good happening to a good man, so I'm happy for Bill. Thank you, Jeff.
This next memo is just an update with regard to the analog devices. It, in some measure, reminds the board about the original proposal from Analog, which was for a 20-year tax increment financing agreement valued at $17.9 million in taxes that would be waived. The company is looking to construct a 215,000 square foot, 3-story parking garage, a 174,000 square foot, 3-story LED certified office building, and construct a 52,000 square foot building known as the so-called hub. The hard and soft costs associated with this project are approximately $157 million. Analog has expressed its desire to consolidate its operations, moving personnel from Norwood and Chelmsford to the Wilmington location. There's been a group of personnel in the various departments that have been working on this for the last few weeks to develop a counterproposal. There was a meeting earlier today that included Selectman McCoy, Selectman Kyra, as well as John Doherty from the Finance Committee. And the expectation is now to go forward and arrange a meeting with representatives from Analog to talk about the prospect of a TIF agreement. Next is the announcement from the Mass Municipal Association about their legislative breakfast. These are events that come up periodically throughout the year as an opportunity for representatives from the cities and towns to get together with their legislators and find out about the pressing issues on Beacon Hill, and also offer comment to our legislators as to what is on our minds. There are a series of dates here. The date that is closest to us, date and location, would be March 9th in Newburyport at the City Hall Auditorium. If anyone's interested, please contact Beverly and she'll sign you up.
Or you can do it online. I registered this morning for the Newburyport, March 9th Newburyport meeting.
Next is a letter from Catherine Maloney from Comcast. This is the Form 500, which is the complaint form that cable providers are required to submit once a year. We received one not too long ago from Verizon. This one looks like the most numerous complaints were for billing. There were 30 associated with billing and 20 associated with equipment.
I'm sorry, so that brought us to board to consider items. And I think our first one is from Grace Chapel to use the town common on Sunday, April 1st, from 6 to 7 a.m. for a community Easter Sunday sunrise service. Any additional feedback or any concerns from town departments?
No.
With that said, I would entertain a motion to grant that request.
Motion so moved.
I have a motion
Second.
made and seconded. Any discussion, questions?
Do they have a snow date? I hate to say that, but just,
They didn't ask for one.
let's hope they don't.
Well, I think Easter is,
They got a direct line to God, so they're all set.
God doesn't have snow dates. So, I'm sorry, we have a made motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. The next board to consider is from the Wilmington band parents and friends to sell coffee, donuts, popcorn, cold drinks, pom-poms, and balloons during the Memorial Day Parade.
Move to grant the request.
Second.
I'll take that as a made and a second for discussion. And the discussion is, make sure you're generous to the band parents. when you walk by them on Memorial Day, because I'll be one of them selling the balloons for their first year in a long time. So I look forward to coming out and handing you each a
Just as
balloon.
long as you don't heckle us from the
I
sidelines.
might be throwing cookies. We'll see how it goes. So we have a made motion and a second. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. And again, the band parents and friends to sell refreshments, popcorn, candy, hot pretzels, soda, water during the Recreation Commission's Summer Concert Series.
Move to grant the request.
Seconded.
Made and second. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Jeff, just through the chair on this, I know I mentioned it at the budget process, but this is when the band parents had the issue with the electricity in the box over there at the gazebo. So I don't know if you're gonna have someone check on that.
Okay, so
I'm not an electrician, but they needed a larger amp, so they needed something more so that when they put the popcorn in and the band plugged in there, amplifies, the whole thing blew. So
Oh, okay.
they said it will take an easy fix, so
All
they
right, I'll
wanted,
talk to our go-to guy, George
who
Hooper.
could fix that for them.
I think that's been looked at, but yeah.
Yeah, it may have.
We want
It's good to double
hot
check.
popcorn, so.
Amen. And hot pretzels, if I heard you
Yeah,
right.
hot popcorn.
Mike's gonna be selling them.
I'll leave that. Oh, geez, I shouldn't say that. The head of the band parents organization's listening. Are we at 9? Sorry, I lost track
Yes.
of where we are. Board to consider the request of the Wilmington Sons of Italy and the Wilmington band parents to use the Swain School parking lot on Saturday, September 8th, 2018, from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. for the purpose of conducting a yard sale to raise funds with a rain date of Saturday, September 22nd. That is the Sons of Italy in concert, so to speak, with the band parents on September 8th. Do we have any,
So moved. Make a motion.
any concerns
No.
at all with the date or anything?
No.
I actually, I have a concern that was brought up to me by the president of the Sons of Italy. The rain date that we're selecting is September 22nd, which could be in conflict with the shredding day on September 22nd. Hopefully it won't rain, so we
Yeah.
don't have to switch it, but their question was, can we run it at the same time? So they have the shredding where they usually do, and I don't know the answer to that question.
How big is the
yard
Do we wait until it's
Good
sizable?
size, yeah.
Yeah, I think that may be a bit of an issue.
So, I don't know.
We may want to, I think it would be advisable if they can come up with another rain date.
Yeah, I don't know where they set up the shredding, how much room they need, but,
Well, you get the traffic, a fair amount of traffic coming in there, and, yeah.
yeah, okay.
So could we accept a motion to grant the September 8th request, and I guess contingent upon establishing an acceptable rain date that they settle with the town manager?
So, yeah.
I'll make that
makes
motion.
sense.
So Ed will make that
Also have
motion.
the-
Beverly, did you get that, General?
One other thing, we also have the farmer's market going on there. at the
This
same-
Sunday.
Oh, so I'm
Sundays,
sorry,
yeah.
excuse me then.
So we have a motion made by Mr. Loud
Second?
and seconded. So all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Board to consider a request of Susan Hendy, PMC, Wilmington, PMC, what's that?
Pan
Pan
Mass
Pan Mass
Challenge.
Challenge, I knew that, thank you very much, I was testing you guys. Pan Mass Challenge, Wilmington Kids Ride Coordinator to close a portion of Carter Lane to conduct the annual Pan Mass Challenge Wilmington Kids Bike Ride on Sunday, May 20th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Do I have a motion?
Move to grant the request.
Second.
Made and seconded, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you to Ms. Hendy and the Pan Mass Challenge. I'm at 11, if I'm doing my math right. Board to consider request of Dana Burnham, President of the Wilmington Farmers Market Association, to conduct the Farmers Market on Sundays, June 10th, 2018 through September 30th, 2018, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Jeff, do you want to highlight that request at all with any details?
The only Sunday that would be, and they understand, would not be available would be the Sunday around July 4th. And I don't have that date offhand, but,
It's noted in their request.
yeah, so we're, otherwise, they're good. They've shortened, you recall that in prior years, They've gone into October, but my understanding is that they've decided to shorten the season.
Still a great tradition, and I'm glad they continue it, frankly, personally, and selfishly
I'll
speaking.
move that we grant the request.
Okay.
Second that.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Great, unanimous. Thank you. Good luck to the farmer's market. And, let's see, board to consider the request of Diana DiGregorio, President of the Wilmington Community Fund, to use the town common parking lot on Saturday, September 22nd, 2018, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. for the purpose of a town shredding day. So that's, as was noted a moment ago. I presume, Jeff, given that we're not going to have the Sons of Italy and band parents rain dating it over there, that the 22nd has no other concerns?
That's correct.
So I would accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Public comments. Mr. West.
Good evening, gentlemen. Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road. Couple of things. One, I was listening on to an earlier selectmen's meeting when the whole proposal of potentially using the Whitfield site for any type of senior housing was mentioned. And they were talking about, when one discussion came about the acreage. And I believe it was stated that it was 1 acre. I think the Whitfield site is actually 8 acres with 3 acres usable, buildable. And at the time when I was on this board, back in 2004-ish, we were looking at the potential of senior housing there, and we talked to then Board of Health Greg Erickson, and he was talking that potentially with the building the school building that was there and putting an addition on, that potentially up to 24 units could be there. So it's just strictly a point of information. Another thing is that on the 13th of November, Board of Selectmen had a meeting specifically at the high school auditorium, specifically to talk about different type of affordable housing and housing options and those type things. And a couple of things that I had mentioned at that time was, one, the possibility of the board coming out and saying, putting an article together that would say that there would be a limit, say for example, like if somebody wanted to put a new development in, that a portion of that development, say 20-25% or some number, I'll leave that blank, but could be set aside for affordable housing. The other thing that I had mentioned was potentially if somebody's subdividing a lot, specifically, hey, look, I'm subdividing my lot either A, because I'm looking to make some money, or B, for a personal reason, maybe a kid wants to, there's an opportunity for the kid to live in town, that if they do that particular lot or those particular lots be deemed affordable housing, so that, hey, if somebody's going from, say, an R60 to an R20, yeah, we're helping them out, but it'd be nice, we're helping their kid out, but it would be nice also for the future, for them to help a future kid out, or a future family or somebody looking to move into Wilmington. So that said, I see that there's, all sorts of articles on the table for this town meeting that are talking about different developments, the Sharapa Farm and several other developments that are going to potentially hurt our affordable housing ratio, the 10% that we're looking for in the future, unless we do something about this. So one of the things that I'm thinking is that would it be possible for the selectmen to think of either an amendment to any of those articles to include some sort of an inclusionary housing, affordability housing type component to them. You have time. You got a couple of months. We have a planning director, conservation director, etc. Is there time to bring those people on board to say, for any of these particular articles, to add an affordability housing type comment to it? So just throwing that out there, because as we're just letting the clock go by, and I know, Kevin, you had made a comment, probably, I don't know, I think about a month ago, I was at the meeting and made some sort of a similar comment, and I think you specifically said words to the effect that you were kind of surprised that Valerie's been working on this, I guess, for a couple of years now, and still hasn't really come up with a real long-term solution. Well, now you get a proposal on the table that a town meeting that's going to potentially, cause some effect to our housing goals. That instead of being 10% could drop us down to, say, 9% or below that. So instead of trying to meet that little margin, we might have to meet a much larger margin 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So just a thought that maybe this board wants to consider coming up with some sort of an amendment to any of these zoning articles.
I'll chime in first. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to talk, but just as my head was listening to you, I was thinking about some stuff. I'm certainly not in a position where I want to defend or justify the actions of Valerie Gingrich, our Director of Planning and Conservation. But it was my common sense, or whatever the word is, my gut feel was that her focus had been, at least for a while, on addressing the vulnerability that the town will have in a few years on with regards to 40B. So with the inclusionary zoning?
Yes.
I messed that up. The inclusionary zoning concept is not one that will, it's not like a bullet. It's not going to get us to 10%, but once we're at 10%, that's a method that can keep us there over a protracted period of time. So hypothetically, we get to 10% of affordable by 2020, and then if we have by then an inclusionary zoning statute in place, then as continued development happens over the course of the subsequent 10 years, I guess ideally, and this is my understanding of it, by the time we get to 2030, we don't have this, oh my God, we've got to figure out how we address our 40B problem in 2030, because we've been using the inclusionary zoning statutes. Well, as at our special meeting that we had at the high school to talk about the potential for creating an article to go on this town meeting warrant to potentially use town-owned land, that was not voted in favor of, so we're not going to have that kind of an article. So really what that, to me, is what that did, in my mind, was, and now it puts Valerie in a position of, well, shoot, that kind of work, we'll push that aside, because I think a fair amount of energy had been put towards that effort, which didn't result in, didn't have fruits of her labor there. So I would like to see her spend some time, and can it be done? Maybe, because I'll tell you, Frank, I don't mind your idea. An inclusionary zoning addendum or amendment to one of these articles may make sense. It's not going to be a magic bullet that gets us to the 10%. I don't think in the next 3 years, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea if it's something that can be crafted in a way that makes sense. The issue in my mind is, we got to play nice in the sandbox with the developers. Maybe that's, I shouldn't overstate that, but those that are doing the development and the construction in our community are partners in our community. So I guess if we're going to ask of them to participate in this inclusionary zoning concept, I think there's merit to the idea that we need to bring them to the table and have them be a part of those conversations on how do we put a statute like this together that is universally agreeable and acceptable. And I don't know if we can get there that fast. So I like your idea. I just don't know if we can get there. So yeah, Ed, please.
Frank, I like your idea a lot, and I've been saying it for a long time. This town does need to get with the developers and include an inclusionary bylaw. Because if in May some of these proposed changes happen, Mr. McCoy made a statement of 750 condos. That's a lot. That's going to add to the housing, which means there's a lot more that we have to come up with to make our 10%. So an amendment's a great idea. But I'm glad you're keeping it in front of us, because we need to keep having these conversations, not only in 2018, 2019, 2020, but beyond. And I'll state it again and again and again. Not only do we need affordable housing for the elderly or the over 55 community or the over 59 community, as Mr. McCoy has stated before, the young kids too. We need it for both. And we got to keep having these conversations. And yeah, I know it's a busy time, but we got to stop talking about it. It's like the North Wilmington Fire Station. We got to stop talking about it and get it done. So we have to get it done. And we have to get with the developers and get it done. So thank you for bringing it and keep it in front of us, because I do agree with you 100%.
Well, that's why, if I may, real quick, Mike, is And to your comment, you're right, if we're 500, 600, 700, whatever the amount, whatever the number is, and don't forget, we've got a lot of units that haven't been built yet that have no affordable housing complement to it. So what I'm trying to say is that you've got some of these lots, you're just, as we're kicking the can down the road, like you said, well, let's talk about it in 2018, no, well, 2019, 2020. We're kicking it down further and further down the road, and now we've kicked it to the road that it sounds like by the 2020 census, we're gonna be below the 10%. So as you're saying, Mike, let's work with the building community. Well, today we have an advantage to talk to the building community. If we're at 9.2% on a affordable housing stock, all of a sudden the leverage goes away. So all I'm suggesting is that if there's a way in some of these articles that we add some sort of affordability component to it. You know, and the thing is that we've got a lot of units that are going to be going on the market probably within the next year or two. You got the over 55 development over in Andover Street up by Arrow Park.
Yeah. Exactly, talking about.
Foster's Pond, rather, excuse me. You got a few other developments that, you know, like Walpole Woodwork is developed and stuff like that. I'm just saying, again, will any of these single components get us to 10%? Absolutely not. Will it get it one little step closer to that 10% threshold? Possibly. So I'm just saying, you got a couple of months to think about it. You know, maybe there's a way to craft some, or either as individuals or as a board, to come up with an amendment, use the town resources, and just think about it. That's all I'm asking, because the thing is that as we're talking about it further and further, we're losing time, and as housing prices are going up, we're losing that affordability complement for the kids, and, you know, for anybody that wants to either stay in Wilmington or move in Wilmington. That's all I say.
Thank you, Frank. I ask you, Jeff, you speak to and work with Valerie every day. You know, I don't see her all that often. Is that is that enough time for her potentially to craft some language that we could offer up, or are we barking up the wrong tree? And if so, why?
So certainly the language could be crafted between now and March 12th. It will not have had the opportunity, she will have not had the opportunity to have discussions with the development community to a point where they might be inclined to support something like this. You know, this was, I would take exception to the idea that she's been working on this for 2 years. This was discussed during the course of the last 6 or 8 months as she's been making presentations to the board about the issues with affordable housing. She commented at least one of the meetings, because I've read the minutes here not too long ago, that an inclusionary bylaw would be advisable. It's not going to get us to 10%. We are, as she has indicated in multiple meetings, by the 2020 census, going to be below 10% as of today, regardless of whether an inclusionary bylaw gets adopted at this town meeting or whether it doesn't. We are below 10%, or will be. So will it help us tread water and keep from getting more below 10%? I suspect it will, but it's not going to solve the problem of whether or not we are at or below 10% by 2020. So to answer your question, you know, I suspect a bylaw can be drafted between now and the 12th. Will it have been vetted by the development community? No.
But just to go along with what Mr. West was saying, inclusionary zoning, I believe that we've been talking about it for quite some time, beyond the 6 or 8 months that the town manager mentioned. I recall when Chairman O'Connell was here, and that was well beyond the 8-month period, that we've been talking about this, and Valerie has been talking about it. And as you say, I think she's just kicking the can. I mean, what is taking so long to talk to local developers? Even if you say it's been 6 to 8 months, that's 6 to 8 months. I mean, make a phone call, be aggressive. So I don't know what's 6 to 8 months is as.
Did the board take a vote during the last 6 to 8
If
months?
she's bringing it up, Jeff,
Yeah.
and she's saying that she's going to be looking into it and then doesn't do it,
I
then
think she was
what
looking
she's
for
waiting
some,
for,
she was
Jeff?
looking for some direction from the board
Oh.
of selectmen. I mean, that's why she came
You're
to the board.
kidding, right? I mean, isn't she waiting for direction from you once in a while?
Yeah.
Come on, Jeff. I mean, we've been talking about that issue for more than 2 years, and she hasn't done anything yet on it. She needs us to vote every little item. Are we gonna micromanage that? I don't think so, and I certainly don't wanna micromanage it. But I mean, we keep bringing it up, and so doesn't she, and all we hear from you is that she hasn't talked to the developers yet. Well, when is she gonna do it? You say it's 6 to 8 months, and I think it's been longer.
Okay, not sure where we ended on that. I would like to pursue it. And so, in what it is, I'm not entirely sure, but, you know, we have a timeline, we know when town meeting is, and we know when the articles are written, so let's take a swing at it. I mean, that's my feeling on it. If you guys don't agree, then let's kick the can to next year. I kind of, until Frank, you brought this tonight, I thought, well, inclusionary zoning and another swing at doing something with regards to affordable housing to offset 40B threats were something that the town, was going to have to aggressively take up for 2019. That we've if we have the ability to fast forward a little bit, let's do it. If that's unrealistic, let's find that out. So
Well, certainly, we can draft an article and have it on the warrant for the 12th.
is it an article or is it an amendment to an existing article? We have petition articles to change some zoning. Can we change the zoning with a contingency or an inclusionary component there? Or
I think it needs to be a standalone article.
is that right? Okay, I take your word for it there.
And through the chair, just, now I'm gonna say, you just mentioned that we wouldn't be able to have the article until she has a sit-down with the developer, so we wouldn't upset the apple cart. But now you're saying we can
Well,
have
look,
an article,
if
Jeff.
the board
I
wants
mean,
an
it's-
article, it isn't a question of drafting up the verbiage. We can draft that up in a week. The question was, do we want to engage the development community?
And I think we
If we
do,
do not
Jeff.
want to engage the development community, then we can draft an article and we'll have it on the
That's not what
board.
we're saying, Jeff. We're saying that we should engage the
Well,
development committee, and we're
yeah.
saying what's taking so long.
And I don't think,
I don't think we should have an article drafted up without talking to the development committee.
And there are other things going on between now and March 12th, and I don't think there's going to be an opportunity to have a fully vetted conversation with the developers between March 12th. I guess now and March 12th, we can debate whether or not Valerie has been slouching on the job and not doing what she's supposed to do. I don't tend to agree with that, but
Excuse
if
me,
members...
those are your words. Those
Well,
are not my
you're-
words, and you
you're-
make sure that those were
That
your
is your,
words
that
you
is
said.
your inference, that she has
No, those
not
were
been doing
your
her
words, and
job.
I never said
And
that. She
I will
is
not...
a great director, and
okay.
she does her work fine. And I
Okay.
never said that, you said it.
You
Make
have
sure
been
you
making
know
the
it.
inference that she has
I've
not
made
been
no
doing her
inference.
job because she has...
No, I made no inference to that at all.
Okay, all right, well, you know, the fact of the matter is, the criticism has been that she has not been engaged in developing an inclusionary bylaw. I consider that to be a
Has she
criticism.
been?
She has not
she?
been, so,
Okay, so then where is the untruth to that?
well, there is
there
no
an untruth to
untruth.
that?
There is no untruth to
Then
that.
why are you assuming I'm saying that she's slouching?
Well,
That's absolutely incredible that you would say that I referenced that. That's awful that you would say that.
Okay, well, I guess if she hasn't been doing the job by preparing...
Did I
by-
say that she hadn't been doing her job, Jeff?
By virtue of the fact that you said that she has not been preparing an inclusionary article, yeah, I mean, what else is there?
Kind of sounded
What are
like
we
that to me
waiting for?
too,
What are we
Kevin, when you
waiting
said
for,
that.
Jeff? Yeah,
Kevin,
what
it
are we
kind of
waiting
sounded
for?
like you said that when
Yeah.
you said it to him.
Yeah,
I'm
what
gonna
are we
be a little
waiting
bit,
for?
I'm gonna be a little Mr. Neutral like Mr. Shampoo, so. You
So
kind
we
of said it a
can-
little bit. You
we
kind
can
of said
have-
it.
We can have an article
alluded to it.
prepared for...
Come on. We're big boys here. You said it. Come on.
We will have an article prepared by March 12th. What I cannot guarantee is what opportunities exist between now and March 12th to have conversations with the Development Committee. I don't anticipate this is a situation where she can simply call up the developers, say, come on in for a meeting, and in one session have some consensus around an article. If that is, but, we can certainly make that effort and see where the chips fall.
I dare say this, I hold her in tremendously high regard, but she works with the development community every day, all day, and she has them on speed dial, I'm guessing. They certainly have her on speed dial, I'm guessing. So I know we're putting the screws to you and to Valerie right now, but that's the price of admission. I think it's worth taking a swing at this. And if Valerie says, listen, there's no way we can do this, not do it right, then have her come to the 12th meeting and make her case. And I'll listen intently because I already stated, I hold her in very high regard, and I think everyone on this board does. So have her make that case to us as to why she can't or doesn't recommend that this is a path that we should go. If we can make it happen, let's make it happen. The development community has known this is coming. We're not sudden, no one in the development community in Wilmington is gonna have an epiphany like, oh my God, inclusionary zoning, I've never heard of this, I can't believe this is coming. This has been coming for a while. Now it's coming a little faster. I would hope that they're prepared for it and can adapt to it. So I think we take a swing at it. I'm sorry, yes, Mr. West.
Just to kind of conclude, from my perspective, again, the date, whether she's been working on it 8 months, 2 years, whatever, I was just going respectfully to something that I know that Kevin had said at, I think a couple of meetings ago or something like that, and whether that date's accurate or not, I don't know, but that was the point. My point wasn't necessarily to take a swing at Valerie per se, to say 8 months versus 18 months or whatever. I just, like I said, I had heard a date mentioned at a board meeting and kind of went with that. And my perspective is that I was looking specifically at the petitioned articles that are out there, not necessarily drafting a comprehensive inclusionary bylaw, but that's, again, I'm just throwing it out there just as a way to help us either get to 10% or maintain 10% or whatever the way it is to get some affordable housing component in so that we don't lose valuable pieces of land just at the full market rate and then say, gee, we're at 8%, how'd we get there?
Yeah, a small bite of the apple is at least a bite of the apple.
Yeah, so again, I wasn't looking to get any contention with the board or anything like that, and just, like I said, I'm just pro-affordable housing in this town to help people out a little bit.
Well, if there's a way to do it, we'll find a way. And if it means we have to, because of the time constraints and other things, that we have to kick the can, so be it, we do so. But I don't think any of us is inclined towards, putting blinders on and putting this problem down the line.
Yeah, and Mike, I'm not looking to suggest to have anything done quick and bad.
Right.
But if it's something that can be done good, whether it's quick or not, that's a good thing. And like I said, is that I just think for the petitioned articles especially, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. Just, if the board's so inclined to make an amendment to those, but.
Well, just to be clear, we cannot amend petition articles. Petition articles are submitted by the petitioner, and those have to be placed on the warrant in the form that they are presented. So if the idea is to amend a petitioned article, I'm sure town council would back me up in saying that we can't do that. So it would have to be an article that would be brought forward by the Board of Selectmen to include on the warrant.
Whichever way, Jeff. And again, I mean, I only go by amending articles because I've been to town meetings for years, and many times we've had an article and we've had them amended. Now, whether the Board of Selectmen can amend a petitioned article, I don't know. But I just know that there's been articles brought up in the past, hey, I want $50,000 for X, and somebody stands up and says, no, how about we amend it to 40,000, and we go through a half-hour litany and the 40,000 passes, or not.
I think the petitioner has to agree to the amendment, right?
No, you vote on it.
On a petition article?
You can send an article, and I can amend it.
You can amend
Right.
it, but you have to decrease it. You can't increase it, you can decrease it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Mr. McCoy. If you said, look, Article X is to drop zoning from R something to R something, we'll say, okay, as long as you have a 25% affordability component to it.
We're talking about inclusionary, you're looking to increase. You have to, if you make an amendment, you have to decrease the scope of that article. That's the only way you can make an
If it needs to be
amendment.
a separate article, then so be it.
You know, you got it now.
So, I'm sorry, did we come to a conclusion to ask Jeff to ask
So
Valerie?
Let me just, for the record,
Yeah.
these were the minutes from November 13th, 2017. These discussions took place with regard to affordable housing. Selectman Kyra stated that this is with regard to the inclusionary zoning. Stated that this has been talked about for over a year and asked why there is a delay. Ms. Gingrich noted that there were discussions on the topic prior to her employment with the town, and it was not a popular idea. She noted that she has discussed the idea with developers to get their opinions in order to develop a bylaw that would benefit the town and the developers would support. The town manager stated that it was appropriate that the discussions happened with developers rather than dictate what the requirements should be. So there were discussions, I guess, and I do recall to some measure when Carol Hamilton was on board, but, and I don't recall the specifics, but apparently it was not an idea that was particularly popular at that time. So has it been discussed for some period of time? Yes. Has it been an issue that someone has been sitting on? I don't think so.
So, do we,
But we will put together an article, and we will, I will instruct Valerie to contact the development community and engage them on what they would consider to be acceptable. I presume what will happen is she'll draft something up and then circulate it.
let's see what comes back. I already said, I don't know how you guys feel, but if she comes back to us on the 12th and says, listen, there's just no way we can craft an article, and here's the reason why. The reasons why, probably, listen, from my perspective, they ought to be pretty damn good. But if those reasons, are just, I was really busy. Okay, well, that's, and not to detract from her, the amount of time that she puts in. I know she is very busy, but I think that we've indicated a strong desire to see something happen here. So, if it's imprudent, if it doesn't make sense, if it's a bad idea for any number of construction-based reasons or otherwise, let her come and make that case. If it's something that we can do, I hope that she can put something together for us to review. So, I don't know, I'll leave it at that, I suppose. Okay? Public comments, we're still there. Yes, sir.
I am Jeff Wood from 18 Frederick Drive.
Yes, sir.
Just one comment from earlier, when you guys were talking about the database of the $44,000 and the fire and the police and all the data that's being collected. Honestly, from being involved in the business since 1983, I really think this is easy database analysis. And I would even propose, and this will come across as simplistic, but I would propose that you set this up with one of your math teachers to do it as a project, because the kind of stuff you're talking about is any database can separate out the police and the fire, and if cruisers are showing up before a fire department, just take them out of it. I really think this is a easy database analysis, and not even database. I mean, I just think it's an easy analysis based on my experience. Be glad to lend my expertise and experience if you want to sit down and talk to some of the teachers in school and see if you can do it as a project, because I really think you can save a lot of money here. So, just one idea.
Thank you.
As far as OPEB goes, I guess I got a disconnect on where I think the criticality is, because the Mass Municipal Association, their executive director report shows on October 1st, 2017, or October 2nd, that this is the dark cloud looming over all towns and communities in Massachusetts. So I know this is, I believe, an organization you guys belong to. So I'm reading it on their site. You've got to be reading it on their site. They stayed in that October 2nd article that in September, the S&P put out guidance stating they are going to come after all towns and communities. That they see this as a huge debt burden on everybody. So why do you feel that you're ever going to get to a point over the next 23 years, as the current legislature is, that you have to have this paid off by June 30th, 2040, that this is going away? I don't see it going away. Mass Municipal Association doesn't see it going away. Standard & Poor's doesn't see it going away. So I really think you're down the wrong track if you think that you're going to minimize what you're putting into this. If anything, you're maximizing it. And that article states that the entire Massachusetts and all the communities and towns are $46 billion in debt, which leads me down the path of that, the money that you get from the state on an annual basis is going away, because I know from looking at the data a couple of months ago, Massachusetts, $19 billion in debt. This has to get paid eventually. Now, I know that some of the numbers are out there, but what is the number that we are currently at for OPEB?
Wilmington's share of that is $105 million based upon our last actuarial study.
Right. So 105 million, you got to pay it off in 23 years, and
Well,
that's current value, right?
Just to be clear, I think the number that was talked about before, so there's a couple of things here. Pension liability, we're supposed to have that retired by 2035. That's a separate and distinct liability which we're dealing with. OPEB, to my knowledge, there isn't a drop-dead date by which we have to have it paid off, but clearly it's not only a Massachusetts problem, it's a problem with cities and towns across the country.
I agree with you. But the thing is, as a taxpayer, I feel I owe it to the people that you made these commitments to. So all of us are in this together, right? I mean, I don't care what Andover's doing or what, California's doing, right? We owe this. We owe the 105 million, we owe the retirement side of it, right? So we've got to figure out what's the right way to do this, right? We just can't think, I've already heard the phrase, kicking it down the line, right? We can't think the legislature's going to change, although it may, because it already did change, right? I mean, I think it was 2025 or 2030, and they kicked it back to that. But we can't keep banking on that, right? I mean, someday this bill's going to come due. How do we pay that? So that's my concern, and I just feel like it's definitely not going away based on the things I'm reading, and I know you guys are reading the same stuff. So just an overall comment. And to follow, in a final comment, Mr. Bendel's statement, I hate to even ask this question, but based on what's going on, when I went up to get the agenda for tonight's meeting, I saw that on February 16th, I could have the date wrong, you guys had met with DeRentis, am I saying his name right? And now you're meeting with a guy named Hillman. So does that mean that Foskett, as our existing town council, he has no interest in following on with the business of doing anything with us?
No, so just to be clear, the firm Deutsch Williams is disbanding at the end of the month. Some of the attorneys in that firm are staying in Boston and reconstituting themselves as a new law firm. That firm, as I understand it, is being headed up by Paul Durensis, the gentleman that Selectman Kyra and Selectman McCoy and I met with previously. There's a separate element of the firm that is reconstituting and is, I guess, moving out of Boston. That firm is actually headed up by Liz Valerio, but a couple of the individuals that are going to be with that firm are John Foskett, who is the point person for our current council, as well as Rob Hillman, who is the gentleman that we're slated to meet with on Friday.
Okay, all right. And were we unhappy with them? Because, I mean, if one of the group is staying together, I mean, if they hadn't disbanded, would we have issued an RFP and said we were unhappy? So it would seem to me, just common sense wise, that, if one guy's staying and his name's on the firm, right? And his name was on the firm of what existed, even though they went by the shorter name, right? So
yes.
Paul Durensis was one of the actual partners in the five-name firm, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, seems like they would still be a good, counsel, right? So you do, obviously, he said in the last meeting, he's definitely gonna go after our business, right? And try to stay involved.
Well, I certainly, Selectman McCoy and Selectman Kyra can step in here. My understanding was clearly that he was looking to continue to service the town beyond March 31st through this interim period. I don't know that we get into a lot of discussion about long-term beyond that. I guess my impression, but I don't know that he specifically said that he would be interested beyond that. I suspect he would, but I don't know that for certain.
The manager's correct. He short term, looking for the 6 months. He didn't say about any further than that. And you're right.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Very well. New business, items not reasonably anticipated by me 48 hours in advance of the meeting. I'll start with Ed.
Thank you. At every meeting, I get the privilege and honor to shout out to a veteran, and today I'm going to talk about George K. Smith. He's a longtime Wilmington resident. He was a Navy CB during the Vietnam time, Vietnam Service Medal with 2 stars. He was a Fleet Marine Force Combat Operations Insignia in Vietnam Campaign Medal with a device, among many other awards and medals. I want to thank him and his family for the service to this country, and all other veterans out there and all currently serving in the services. I appreciate your service and thank you. That's all I have.
Very well. Mr.
Oh,
McCoy.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, I got a couple of quick things. If I have to make a motion to reconsider, to show full support of the RFP we need to send for town council, I'm willing to do it. And the reason why I say that is this. I've been serving on this board for 28 years. I've spent probably hundreds of meetings in that room talking to town council in executive session. I've gone to over 30 town meetings. I've dealt with 4 different town councils. I would very much like to be part of the screening committee when it comes relative to screening out the process of the RFPs. I'm free during the day. It doesn't have to be a special nighttime. I can make any hour of the day. I'm asking this board that I would very much like to serve on that if there's no objection with the board. And I'll say it, if I gotta make a motion to reconsider, be unanimous on this vote, I'm happy to do it. I've been around a long time, served 3 years on the planning board, and 4 different town councils. And I think I probably interact with more town councils, more than probably anybody in this room, to be totally honest with you. Probably as much as Jeff, maybe a little less, you know, and much more than some of the department heads, and probably as equal as some of these department heads. So I've been involved. So I would think it would be kind of, I'm asking that request of this board to do that. I'll change the vote if it's necessary. If there's no objection.
Well, little Mr. Up the Middle has an objection. Jeff has identified participants that would be a part of the preliminary screening committee. You, as a member of this board, would be a part of the final committee that ultimately selects and hires the town council. And that committee, of course, is the Board of Selectmen. So I appreciate your desire to participate in the process. My personal feeling, Mike, and I'm not trying to pick a fight, but my personal feeling is you're not unbiased on the matter. I think you approach the matter with some with subjectivity or lack of objectivity, and I would prefer that you stay as an elected member of the Board of Selectmen and be a part of the process of hiring the final recommended attorneys that the committee comes forth. But I would prefer that you not be a part of that recommended committee.
All right, why don't you do, if that means to take a vote of the board, or why don't we just ask John Foskett if it's okay for a member of the board? I resent those remarks, but that's okay.
I don't mean
You know,
to,
you know,
I tried to
but
do it
just-
diplomatically, sir.
I know, but it didn't seem it that way. I was willing to change the vote with everybody. You know, trying to be
to
good
change your
about
vote
that.
to suit your own needs.
No, I'm not-
Certainly, it's up to
to suit
anybody
my
else
own
who
needs.
wishes to offer up a
I don't
motion
think
if
I'm
they care to.
suiting my own needs. I mean, serve this town.
You want to
for
change the
30
vote so
years.
you can, whatever. We're not making any progress.
All right, let me continue on, then, that's fine. Is there
Does
an
anybody
objection
want?
from the board?
I'm offering it up.
can't.
I'm one voice.
I think that the town manager has set up the subcommittee. I think that he has the professionals on there, but I also want every single contract that comes in. In other words, Mike, if we get 15 people that put in for this, okay, and the subcommittee says, well, we're taking the best of 6 of them. All right, so we see what they're gonna send us, the top 6 that they feel is there. But we see all 15, because it's our decision. So if we go with their 6 firm recommendation and we want to add 1 or 2, then we have that opportunity to add 1 or 2.
I realize that.
Because
I know
we're,
that.
so,
I mean, you
Let
could
them do their
interview all
work.
15 if you wanted.
yeah, no, I'd rather them do their work and then we can see how it comes out. Because
Well,
they're
I
gonna,
know how that
ultimately, they're
works.
gonna see all 15.
All right,
And they should somehow grade all 15 for us to see how it came out.
all right, fine.
I think.
Mr. Bendel?
Yeah, I really appreciate what you and Mr. Kyra have done thus far, and it doesn't really matter to me. We're ultimately gonna hear all the applicants here as a board.
All right. All right, that's not an issue. All right, fine. I just got one more thing I'd like to say under new business, and I'm going to follow the chairman's lead. Obviously, I was recovering from surgery in the first part of January, and he made 2 points. The chairman stated that he wasn't going to be running for re-election. Sad to say, that's not going to happen with me. The second thing, I noticed he endorsed Mr. Eaton, and that's his right to do so. I'm going to take this opportunity, I'm going to say it once. I'm fully endorsing the candidacy of Robert Fasula Jr. for member of the Board of Selectmen. His family's roots run deep in this community. He's a graduate of Wilmington Public Schools, and he's been in this community a long time. And that's all I'm going to say right here at this meeting, just is equal as Mr. Shampoo. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Unequal to Mr. Shampoo, because I'll go on the record, and anyone can check the minutes. The night that I made the announcement that I wasn't going to be running for re-election, I did suggest that the only reason, not the only reason, but one of the reasons I felt comfortable in making that decision was because someone had pulled papers to run for the seat, and that someone was someone that I had very high opinion of, and that I would hope that as time went on, that the rest of the town would come to learn that that someone would be someone worthy of their support as he has earned my support. I never mentioned his name. And I know that there's a member of the press in this room that said Mr. Shampoo did never mention Mr. Eaton by name, but he implied it. I did imply it, but I've always said, we don't do politics from this table. We do government at this table. I do politics in the hallway. And if anybody in this town wants to hear my opinion about Mr. Eaton, they can come talk to me in the hallway and I will share many stories about why he's the right man for the job. But I don't do that here at this table because we do government here, not politics. So you didn't take my lead, or at least you took it to the next step, so it wasn't equal. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, let me just, I just want to be clear that, Valerie Gingrich is a talented, professional person. I served with her on committees. I value her opinion, and I never once said that she was slacking in her position. What I said is that she was taking too long, and there's a difference between that. And I'm offended by you, Mr. Hull, saying that I referred her as slacking. I hold her in high regard. And as for the proposal that it seems as if you want to throw it in there, she needs to talk to the development community. I don't know that there'll be ample time for that to be done. So I would suggest that she have discussions with the development community and see what comes from it. I look forward to seeing it, and if it's not time for it to happen, then it's not time for it to happen. But I do believe that it's time for her to have discussions.
I agree. Thank you, sir. Is that it, Kevin?
Yep.
Mr. Bendel?
Oh, you stole my thunder earlier, but I just simply wanted to congratulate our new fire chief and our deputy fire chief and wish them well.
Is that it?
That's all I
Very
have.
well. Thank you. Jeff, important dates, please?
The February 27th, tomorrow night is the Finance Committee next meeting, Room 9, Historical Commission, Information Technology, Board of Assessors, and Town Clerk. March 1st is another Finance Committee meeting at the Memorial Library, Recreation, Library, and Elderly Services. March 6th, Finance Committee meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m., Shawshene Tech. March 8th, Finance Committee, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m., Wilmington Public Schools. March 10th, How-To Fair, Memorial Library, 9 a.m. to 12 noon. March 12th, Board of Selectmen's next meeting here, Room 9, 7 p.m. March 20th is the Finance Committee Planning Board joint public hearing with regard to the warrant for annual town meeting. It will be held in the auditorium at 7 p.m. March 28th is a brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. March 31st, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. April 7th is a rabies clinic, Public Buildings Department, noon to 2. April 9th is the last day to register to vote at the annual town election and town meeting. Town clerk's office will be open 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. April 9th is another Board of Selectmen's meeting at 7 p.m., room 9.
Thank you, sir. With that said, I would accept the motion to adjourn. Made. Second. And seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much and good evening.